Chapter 618. The Ghost Merchant was a mysterious merchant whose earliest history could be traced back to the era of the Empire. When someone who had something he needed appeared in an ancient city, he would appear to trade with the other party. Although this kind of trade was somewhat of a forced trade, the other party's nature was not bad, or rather, not too bad. At least, they were willing to pay a price for the trade, and not directly take it by force. As a powerhouse, when they saw something they needed, they did not take it by force and instead obtained it through trade. Such a powerhouse was worthy of praise, at least in Gray's opinion. Gray had seen far too many powerhouses rely on their strength to take advantage of the weak. He had experienced it himself. Back then, the Nahum family had targeted him because of a silver metal ball. "You have that silver metal ball on you?" Sophia looked at Gray and asked. She did not have a silver metal ball on her, so the problem must be with Gray. "Yes." Gray nodded and touched the purple ring. A silver metal ball the size of a ping-pong ball and a silver metal ball slightly larger than a ping-pong ball appeared in his hand. The silver metal ball the size of a ping-pong ball was obtained by Gray in the Empire's cemetery, and a silver metal ball slightly larger than a ping-pong ball was given to him by a certain clan at his 25th birthday banquet a few days ago. With the two silver metal balls in hand, Gray and Sophia walked along the street in search of the Ghost Merchant. After passing through several streets, Gray and Sophia saw the Ghost Merchant in front of an extremely ordinary stall. This was an extremely ordinary old man. He wore coarse green clothes, and his hair was white. The traces of time could be clearly seen on his face, but with a closer look, one would feel their scalp tingle and a chill run down their backs. This was because there were no eyeballs where the old man's eyes should be. They were pitch black, like an endless abyss. "Senior." Seeing the old man, Gray and Sophia both greeted him respectfully. Gray and Sophia's knowledge had increased by quite a lot after interrogating the person from the Radiant Saint Hall. They already knew that spatial abilities were also an ability of laws, so they had a new guess about the old man's identity. At first, they thought that the old man was from the Empire 1,000 years ago, but now they denied this speculation. Although the Empire 1,000 years ago was stronger than the Purple Moon Kingdom, it was impossible for them to have someone as strong as the old man. Even in the vast and boundless origin world, where there were many powerful forces, only a very small number of people could grasp the ability of laws. The strongest person in the Empire was only in the realm of magic light. It was impossible for anyone to grasp this level of ability, just like how a beggar could control a fighter jet. It was impossible. Taking a step back, if there really was someone who could grasp this level of ability, the Holy Temple of Light would not have been able to invade this plane 1,000 years ago and use this plane as an ovary for hatching magical weapons. Even if the Holy Temple of Light sent someone with the ability of laws, they would not be able to gain any advantage. After all, due to the suppression of the plane, the strongest descender was only in the realm of magic light. Gray and Sophia guessed that the old man was very likely to be from the origin world, and it was very likely that he did not live in this plane. It was just that he had set up some kind of trigger mechanism in some cities of this world many years ago. Once someone appeared in this city with something he needed, he would sense it and descend to this plane. To be able to descend to this plane from the origin world without the help of the plane barrier, the old man's strength was definitely extremely strong. At the very least, he was not in the realm of magic light. The fact that the old man had been able to live for more than 1,000 years was enough to prove this point. Apart from a small number of people with extraordinary talent, under normal circumstances, only experts with extremely high realms could attempt to suppress the bloodline in their body and replenish the ability to form the ability of laws. As for why the old man's realm was clearly higher than the realm of magic light, but he was still able to descend to this plane, it should be because he had the ability of spatial laws. Spatial laws should have the ability to conceal the plane's laws. The only thing that puzzled Gray was why the old man did not descend when he appeared in the ancient city some time ago. What was the reason for his sudden appearance now? Thinking about it carefully, the biggest difference between the two was probably that he had stopped the blood sacrifice and prevented the plane from collapsing. He did not know if it was because the plane was about to collapse at that time, and some kind of change had occurred, causing the old man to be unable to descend to this plane. 6 items. Choose any 2. Hearing how Gray and Sophia addressed each other, the old man seemed to nod slightly, but it also seemed like he did not. He waved his hand, and 6 items appeared in front of the stall, hovering in the air. In the past, he would choose 1 out of 3, but this time, Gray had 2 silver metal balls, so he could choose 2 out of 6. Gray and Sophia could not help but look at the 6 items hovering in the air. The item on the far left was very big. It was almost 30 feet tall, and it was green. It looked like it was made of metal. It was a rune puppet that had a similar appearance to a human. However, it had a total of 4 hands, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. The second item was a 3-inch-long, transparent crystal bottle. The crystal bottle was half filled with purple liquid. The liquid was sticky, and it looked like blood. The words "Purple Flame Disaster Beast" engraved on the bottle also proved this point. This was indeed the blood of a type of blood beast. Moreover, it was very likely to be the blood of a disaster-grade blood beast whose combat strength was comparable to that of a destruction warrior. The third item was a book made of leather. The leather was light yellow. It was unknown what kind of blood beast leather it was made of. The cover had the Purple Flame Beast Blood spell written on it. Gray hesitated. When the spirit merchant did not stop him, he quickly flipped through the book. He noticed that the book had blood spells ranging from murderous class to annihilation class. The annihilation blood spells in the book were related to the Purple Flame Disaster Beast. The fourth item was a green, thin sword. The sword was long and narrow. The surface of the sword had a light gold pattern. It made the sword look very beautiful. The fifth item was a set of blue battle armor. The battle armor covered the entire body. The head, torso, hands, legs, and feet were covered. After wearing it, one would receive full protection. The sixth item was a wooden box. The wooden box was open, and there was a cotton cloth inside. There were 4 crystal balls on the cotton cloth. The crystal balls were pure black. They were so black that they did not allow light to pass through them. Seeing the 4 crystal balls, Gray thought of the old man's eyes. They were also black and did not allow light to pass through them. Gray and Sophia looked through the 6 items at the same time. They looked at each other. Then Gray asked, "Senior, what are you talking about? Can you tell me what these things are?" Gray pointed at the 6th item. It was the wooden box with the 4 black crystal balls inside. He did not ask about the other 5 items. He knew the other 5 items, and he knew what they were used for. Even if he asked, he would not be able to get more information. It was impossible to know the power level or level of the items, so he did not ask. It is a random teleportation ball. After you crush it, you will be teleported to a random place. The old man's voice was dry. There was no emotion in it as he spoke. Random teleportation. After hearing the introduction, Gray and Sophia looked as if they were thinking about something. This should be a method to escape at a critical moment. When one encountered danger, one could crush the black crystal ball to teleport away. As for why it was a random teleportation and not a fixed teleportation point, it was most likely because of the distance of the teleportation. If there was a fixed teleportation point, the teleportation location would not be able to be teleported if it was too far away from the teleportation point. For example, the spatial teleportation of the purple ring could not be more than 1,000 miles. After figuring out the use of the 6 items, Gray looked at the 6 items again. He looked at the 6 items one by one and was slightly hesitant to make a decision. He looked at Sophia and asked, "Which 2 items do you think are suitable?" The value of the 6 items is definitely not low. How you choose depends on what you need. Sophia's beautiful eyebrows raised slightly. After thinking for a while, she said, although the levels of the 6 items were unknown, they were definitely very high. The value of the items the ghost merchant took out would be determined by the size of the silver metal balls. This time, the 2 silver metal balls in Gray's hand were quite large. One of them was even bigger than a ping-pong ball. The items the ghost merchant took out to trade would definitely be of great value. "Do you need anything?" Gray held his chin with his right hand and pondered. After a while, he raised his head and looked at the 6 items. "I can rule out the sword." After looking through the 6 items, Gray ruled out the sword first. Although the grade of this weapon might not be low, he did not lack weapons right now. Not only did he have the mana weapon he had taken from the people of the Radiant St. Hall, but he also had a sword-type mana weapon of unknown grade, which was definitely of high grade. He had enough mana weapons. I can rule out the battle equipment as well. Gray ruled out the battle equipment as well. With the alloy transformation ability, his defense had far surpassed his cultivation base and was already extremely powerful. There was no need to waste a chance on defense. Then there are 4 items left. I'll choose 2 out of 4. No, I should say I'll choose 1 out of 2. Gray looked at the remaining 4 items. Of the 4 items, the Purple Flame Disaster Beast Blood and the Purple Flame Beast Sequence Blood Technique were a set. If he chose one, he would have to choose the other to achieve the greatest effect. Since these 2 items were a set, there were naturally only 2 choices left. He could either choose the Purple Flame Disaster Beast Blood and the Purple Flame Beast Sequence Blood Technique, or he could choose the Talisman Puppet and the Random Transfer Orb. After looking around, Gray could not make up his mind. In the end, he still made his choice. Senior, I'll choose these 2. Gray extended his hand towards the Talisman Puppet and the Random Transfer Orb. In the end, he chose these 2 items. All right, the Ghost Merchant nodded. Without seeing him do anything, the other 4 items disappeared, leaving behind only the Talisman Puppet and the wooden box with the Random Transfer Orb. Following this, the 2 silver metal orbs in Gray's hands disappeared as well. Before Gray could even react, the silver metal orbs had already disappeared. It was evident that the Ghost Merchant was far stronger than Gray. After that, the Ghost Merchant quickly disappeared as well. The sounds of the outside world gradually became clearer. Gray and Sophia were returning to the real world. With a wave of his hand, Glenn put away the rune puppet and the random teleportation orb. When he was done, he and Sophia had already returned to the real world. The passers-by beside them didn't seem to have noticed their sudden appearance, and very naturally avoided them and went to other places. Chapter 619. I hope I didn't make the wrong choice. The 2 choices were the Blood of the Blood Fiends and the Blood Technique, the Runic Puppet and the Random Teleportation Orb. The reason why Gray chose the Runic Puppet and the Random Teleportation Orb was because he urgently needed these 2 items. What did Gray lack right now? He lacked the strength to break out of his predicament. With the Radiant St. Hall blocking the exit of the plane, he could not leave even if he wanted to. Right now, he and everyone else in the plane seemed to be trapped in a cage, but the exit of the cage was blocked by powerful existences. If he wanted to break out of this predicament, he needed great battle prowess. If he had great battle prowess, he would be able to wipe out the experts of the Radiant St. Hall stationed outside the plane and leave. As a result, he chose the Runic Puppet, because the Runic Puppet could increase his battle prowess in a short amount of time out of the 6 items. Of course, he was not certain whether he could obtain enough battle prowess to break out of his predicament. He could only take a gamble. The Random Teleportation Orb was a bonus, but it was not completely useless. If the Runic Puppet could kill the experts stationed by the Radiant St. Hall, then he would be able to leave this plane and enter the Origin World. However, after entering the Origin World, he would definitely be pursued by the Radiant St. Hall, who had discovered that the plane had fallen. And if he used the Random Teleportation Orb to escape after killing the experts stationed by the Radiant St. Hall, then the Radiant St. Hall would naturally not be able to track him down. These 2 reasons made him choose the Runic Puppet and the Random Teleportation Orb in the end. After encountering the Ghost Merchant, the 2 of them no longer had any plans to continue playing around. They urgently wanted to test the power of the Runic Puppet, so they found a remote place and used spatial teleportation. Gray and Sophia appeared in a forest. Punk! He touched the purple ring and released the Runic Puppet. The Runic Puppet smashed down like a mountain, causing the ground to cave in and tremble slightly. The Runic Puppet was less than 10 meters tall. Among the Runic Puppets Gray had seen before, it was on the shorter side. Whether it was the Runic Puppets of the Wallen family or the Runic Puppets he had seen in the tombs of the Empire, they were all easily over 10 meters tall. However, what was unexpected was that this rune puppet was not light. It was conservatively estimated to be over 100 tons. It was not even 10 meters tall, but it had a weight of over 100 tons. The metal used to create this rune puppet was definitely extremely dense. Has the royal family cracked the runic puppet obtained in the Empire's tomb? Looking at the runic puppet, Gray thought of the runic puppet obtained by the Purple Moon Kingdom in the Empire's tomb. He could not help but ask Sophia. No, although we have gathered several rune masters to decipher it, there's still a large gap between the current standard of rune masters and that of the Empire. It will be difficult to decipher it without a few years. Sophia's dynasty, the runic puppet, was the crystallization of runes. It contained many high-level runic techniques and was a product that had reached an extremely high level of runic prowess. The runic puppet obtained in the Empire's tomb was the best of the Empire's runic prowess. With the Purple Moon Kingdom's runic prowess, cracking it would be a long process. Gray nodded his head in understanding. This was not outside of his expectations. His gaze once again turned to the green formation puppet, searching its body. Although he had never obtained a runic puppet before, Gray still knew how to gain control of a runic puppet. There were records in the Empire's books. Generally speaking, when using a brand new runic puppet that had never been used before, one first had to find a magic node to inject mana into. That was the location where mana was injected, and mana could be replenished through magic crystals. When the mana was replenished, a control device would naturally pop out from the runic puppet's body. Removing the control device and carrying it around would allow one to control the runic puppet through the device. After circling the runic puppet, Gray found the magic node. It was located at the runic puppet's right foot. There was a thick, circular metal plate that could be opened and closed. After opening the circular metal plate, a groove with a diameter of more than 30 centimeters appeared. This was the magic node. There was a hexagram and concentric circles in the groove, as well as a runic array with many patterns. It was the magic absorption runic array that he had seen in the Empire's books. Gray took out more than 1,000 magic coins from his purple ring and placed them in the groove. Suddenly, the purplish-black magic crystal's color quickly faded. They first turned purple, then light purple, and finally white. This meant that the mana and the magic coins had been exhausted. After digging out the magic coins that had already turned white, Gray once again put them in. After doing this several times, when Gray had almost exhausted all the mana in the 10,000 magic coins, the runic puppet changed. It stopped absorbing mana, and after a series of metal clacking sounds, a cyan metal ring appeared from the inside of the magic node. Gray took off the ring and put it on his left index finger. He suddenly found that he seemed to have some kind of connection with the runic puppet. It was as if he only needed to give an order in his mind for the runic puppet to act according to his orders. He tried to give the runic puppet the order to draw its weapons. Suddenly, he saw the runic puppet's 4 arms move and reach for its back. There were 4 weapons placed side by side there. 2 swords and 2 sabers. Clang! The 4 arms grabbed the 4 weapons, and with a crisp sound of metal, the 4 weapons were pulled out. The 2 swords were held in the hands of the upper 2 hands, and the 2 sabers were held in the hands of the lower 2 hands. Swish, swish! He tried to make the runic puppet swing its weapons. Suddenly, a gust of wind sounded, and a large area of trees in front of them was uprooted by the wind caused by the weapons. What great power! Gray and Sophia's eyes lit up. Either one of them could create this kind of destructive power, but it was impossible to create this kind of destructive power just by stirring the air. Even Gray couldn't do it. Just this point alone was enough to determine that this runic puppet's battle strength was above Gray's. This runic puppet's battle strength should have already surpassed the average magic light. It's not easy to test its battle strength without a reference. Sophia stared at the runic puppet and sighed. I have a way to test it. Staring at the runic puppet, Gray's heart skipped a beat. He had already thought of a way to test the puppet's battle strength. He put away the runic puppet for the time being and teleported again with Sophia. After several teleportations, he and Sophia appeared near the planar barrier that connected to the origin world. Lord Gray, Your Highness Sophia. Seeing his and Sophia's arrival, the people stationed here hurried to welcome them and respectfully saluted them. Gray nodded slightly and looked at Derek, who was motionless and covered in snow, standing at the edge of the planar barrier like a statue. Derek immediately shook off the snow on his body and walked over. The injuries he had suffered in the previous battle had been healed by his reverse nurturing ability. With the help of the alloying ability, Derek's body turned silver gray. Gray released the runic puppet and ordered it to attack Derek. Crack! Immediately, the uppermost right hand of the rune puppet reached behind its back and pulled out a green metal sword. The green sword was 3 meters long, and the material of the sword was clearly the same as the rune puppet. It was made of the same type of metal. Swish! The cyan sword was waved and slashed towards Derek. Before it even got close to Derek, the surrounding ground had already been stirred up by the strong wind stirred up by the sword, and deep scratches appeared one after another. Derek's clothes rustled and were actually ripped to shreds by the wind. The huge azure sword finally landed on Derek's body. Spurt! With the crisp sound of flesh being cut open, Derek's tough body, which was completely unscathed by the Holy Maiden's blood skill, was actually cut open by the huge azure sword. Not only that, but the huge azure sword continued on, cleaving deeply into Derek's body. Bang! Derek's body was sent flying backwards at a speed several times faster than a cannonball. A long slash appeared on the ground, extending several thousand meters before stopping. From afar, Derek seemed like a tiny black speck. This power! The group hurried over and could not help but gasp. Gray and Bart had seen Derek's defense before, while Sophia and the others had heard about it. It was a defense that even the powerful Holy Maiden struggled to break through. It was a defense that few magic light techniques could match. However, right now, Derek's defense could only be described as fragile before the azure runic puppet's attack. A slightly slanted wound had sunk deeply into Derek's body, almost cleaving him in half. Dark red flesh flew everywhere, making for an extremely vicious sight. Fortunately, Derek was only a puppet and not a living person. Otherwise, that attack would have been enough to kill Derek. Has its power reached the level of destruction? According to Gray's estimation, Derek's defense should be unmatched even in magic light. To be able to injure him to such an extent, Gray could not help but suspect that the azure runic puppet's combat power had already surpassed magic light and reached the level of destruction. With this kind of combat power, it's time to give it a try. Gray took a deep breath, calming the excitement in his heart. He looked at the azure runic puppet with a burning gaze. Originally, he had planned to force his way through the realm barrier after reaching magic light. This was because at that time, his combat power should be close to or even comparable to that of a destruction warrior. He should have had a great chance of breaking through. Even if he could not defeat the enemy, he could use the speed of the time rule to escape back to the realm. However, now that he had seen the azure runic puppet's combat power, he felt that he could bring forward the plan. This was because the azure runic puppet's combat power was comparable to his most ideal state. If the azure runic puppet could not break through, even if he reached magic light, it would be difficult for him to break through. Chapter 620. A few days later, many people gathered near the barrier to the Source World. There were kings of the Purple Moon Kingdom, kings of the Jewel Kingdom, Sophia, Francis, Hylia, Princess of the Jewel Kingdom, Gillenwy Austin, and so on. Everyone's face was solemn, and a trace of worry could be seen in their eyes. Surrounded by them was a black-haired young man. His hair was as black as ink, and his eyes were as blue as the sky. He wore a black battle suit, and his slender figure appeared even more slender and tall. This person was Gray. Be careful. Holding Gray's hand in front of everyone, Sophia's long eyelashes fluttered slightly. She could not hide the worry in her eyes. Don't worry. You've seen the battle prowess of the rune puppet. It's enough to defeat the people of the Temple of Light stationed outside. And even if it's not their match, it's still possible to escape. Patting Sophia's hand, Gray smiled reassuringly. Then he swept his gaze across everyone present, nodded slightly, and turned to stride towards the barrier. He was not fast, but not slow either. His steps were steady, and his goal was clear and firm. Just like Gray's current determination, he had to force his way into the Source World this time. No one wanted to become a prisoner and be trapped in a place for the rest of their lives. It was even more so for someone like Gray, who had the ability to leave the plane. When he learned that the Temple of Light had trapped this plane, and that he could not leave, Gray had two choices. One was to settle down and live peacefully in this plane. He believed that with his strength, he could live a very comfortable life in this plane. If he was willing, he could even unify the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom, and restore the glory of the Empire from 1,000 years ago. The other was to accumulate strength, and when he could no longer increase his strength, he would attempt to force his way out and leave this plane to enter the Source World. This was naturally dangerous, and he could die at the hands of the Temple of Light stationed here. Of the two choices, Gray chose the second one without hesitation. No one wanted to be a prisoner and be trapped in a place for the rest of their lives. The words that the Purple Thunder King had carved on the coffin before he died were still vivid in their minds. Regretful, regretful, regretful that I was born in a prison. It was just a short sentence, but it clearly expressed the unwillingness in the Purple Thunder King's heart. The Violet Thunder King was unwilling to accept this. But how could Gray be willing to accept this? From the mouth of the people from the Radiant Saint Hall, he had learned about the vast and boundless world outside. He had yearned for it a long time ago and longed for it. Therefore, even if it was risky, he had to give it a try. At least he wouldn't regret it. Patter, patter, patter. Derek's figure followed closely behind Gray. This was his greatest reliance apart from the Green Room puppet. His metallized defense was something that few people in the Magic Light realm could match. Under Gray's time acceleration ability, his speed would also become something that few people in the Magic Light realm could match. The Rune puppet would be his main fighting force, and Derek would be his main life-saving means. Finally, one person and one corpse approached the planar barrier. The pitch-black planar barrier was so wide that one couldn't see the boundary. It was like an iron bastion blocking the front. It was this planar barrier that had blocked the king-level powerhouses who wanted to leave this realm for more than 1,000 years, trapping them in this planar cage. Of course, even if they had the strength to break through the planar barrier, what awaited them was a tragedy. This was because there were experts from the Radiant Saint Hall stationed outside the planar barrier. Clang! Gray pulled out the sword at his waist. At the same time, the sword was covered with a layer of purple light. In the next moment, as he waved the sword, the purple light shot out from the sword, shooting towards the pitch-black planar barrier. Time was the sharpest weapon in the world. Nothing could escape its decay. The only reason it didn't decay was because it hadn't been long enough. Under the purple light, a hole over 2 meters in diameter immediately appeared on the planar barrier. On the other side of the hole was a barren desert. Hot air leaked out from the hole. Standing in front of the hole, Gray glanced back at everyone. After pausing slightly on Sophia's face, he turned around and stepped into the hole resolutely. The Flamestone Desert was a desert that stretched for thousands of kilometers. It was hot all year round, and not a single blade of grass grew there. It was known as a forbidden zone for life. It was said that this place was not like this tens of thousands of years ago. There used to be a vast ocean here, rich in fish and various aquatic blood beasts. There were small green islands, as well as bird-type blood beasts that circled in the sky to hunt. However, a great battle tens of thousands of years ago had changed the landscape here. The ocean had disappeared, and it had been reduced to scorched earth. It had become a forbidden zone for life. That was an earth-shaking battle. It was said that several experts of laws had clashed. It was extremely tragic, and more than one expert of laws had died in the battle. The reason for the battle had long been impossible to verify. There were only a few versions that were not known to be true. One theory was that an extremely powerful rule-level powerhouse had been feared by several rule-level powerhouses because he was too strong. He had been surrounded and killed by several rule-level powerhouses here, and in the end, he had died in that battle. Another version was that the opportunity to become a god had descended. Many experts of laws had fought for it, and in the end, several experts of laws had died in battle. The opportunity to become a god had also disappeared in the battle. Another version was that a temple had violated a taboo and caused many temples to besiege it. In the end, it had been destroyed in this battle. Of the three theories, only those who had participated in the war back then knew which one it was and which one it wasn't. However, to be able to live from tens of thousands of years ago until now, it was obvious that the other party had to be a rule-level expert. Not to mention that rule-level experts rarely appeared in the outside world and could not be found at all. Even if they could be found, who would dare to seek the truth from a rule-level expert? In the eastern region of the flaming rock Gobi, a building built with rocks unique to the Gobi stood in the middle of the Gobi Desert. At first glance, the building looked extremely rough. It was as if the architect had taken a break while building it. Many places could be seen with uneven marks. However, upon closer inspection, one would feel a sense of majesty and magnificence. It was this informal style that added a sense of heroism to the building. This was the same style as the buildings Gray had seen in the Red Leaf Forest and the Red Desert. "It's so hot. When will these days end?" A dark-skinned man complained as he wiped his saber with an unknown blood beast fur. "Bear with it. This place is too strange. The constant temperature runic array doesn't work. No matter how many constant temperature runic arrays are set up, the heat can seep in. We'll just have to endure for 50 years and wait for the rotation." Another man shook his head with a bitter smile. The man had black hair, but it was different from Gray's black hair. His black hair was slightly gray and curly, sticking tightly to his head. "I'm so envious of Team 1 and 2. It's not time for the rotation yet, but they left with the deacon." The dark-skinned man's voice was filled with envy and even a little jealousy. Originally, there were a total of 3 small teams and a deacon station here. However, a few months ago, they received a notice from the Holy Temple, and 2 of the small teams and the deacon left together, leaving only their small team and a few people who were not that strong to be in charge of logistics. "There's nothing we can do about it. It's our bad luck." The dark-haired man shrugged. "Do you really think it's our bad luck?" The dark-skinned man sneered disdainfully, then lowered his voice slightly. "I heard that team leader offended the deacon and caused us to suffer. The deacon held a grudge against us and kept us here." "Shoo, lower your voice. It's not like you don't know team leader's vengeful personality. If he hears you, you'll be fined your pay." The dark-haired man was startled. He looked around and lowered his voice. Buzz! Suddenly, a trembling sound entered their ears. The 2 of them immediately became alert and subconsciously looked not far away. More than 100 meters away, a black barrier with a diameter of a few hundred square meters stood there strangely. The reason why it was strange was because the barrier could be seen from one side, but if one went around the other side, they would not be able to see anything. They could even pass through it directly. This place was the entrance to a plane, which was why they were stationed here. The barrier that was usually calm actually had a strange ripple. Then, a hole with a diameter of more than 2 meters appeared, and a young man and an old man walked out. "Who's there?" The 2 of them were shocked. They stood up and pulled out their weapons. Their figures quickly rushed toward the black barrier. Their weapons were wrapped in the light of the blood beast ability, and they attacked the 2 of them. The 2 of them did not report. The station was not far away, so the commotion here must have been discovered by their companions. The people who came out were definitely not from the Holy Temple. What they needed to do was to capture or stall the people who came out and buy time for the others to arrive. "You're unlucky to have met me." A sinister smile flashed across the dark-skinned man's face. His battle blade flickered with a demonic red light as he slashed at Gray. Because he was left behind to guard, he was now filled with resentment, so his attack was extremely vicious. He did not care if his attack would cripple the other party. In his opinion, it was fine as long as he could leave a mouth to speak. Nothing else mattered. "So hot." Stepping into the source world through the plane's barrier, a wave of heat immediately came over. Gray could not help but sweat slightly on his forehead. Originally, with his current physique, normal high temperatures were not enough to affect him. Even if he bathed in magma, he would not feel any discomfort. However, in front of this seemingly weak but all-pervasive heat, he felt hot. Swish! From the side, a hot wind blew over in an extremely abnormal manner. Gray looked over and saw a battle blade slashing at him. It was aimed at one of his legs. Chapter 621. "Oomph." Gray snorted coldly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He took a step forward and swept the sword in his hand. Under the acceleration of the laws of time, the sword wrapped in purple light cut through the dark-skinned man's left and right hands before the man's saber could completely cut down. Pooh! Blood spurted out from the dark-skinned man's left and right arms. Under the corrosion of the laws of time, the sword wrapped in purple light was like a divine weapon, easily cutting off the dark-skinned man's left and right arms. The saber in his hand naturally fell to the ground. That was not all. The greatest feature of the laws of time was the ability to strip away one's lifespan. The man's body rapidly aged, and in the end, he became an old man with one foot in the grave. Thud! The man's old body fell to the ground. He trembled as he tried to climb up with his broken arm, but it was difficult for him to even move. He raised his head with difficulty and looked at Gray in horror. There was shock and fear on his face. What greeted him was Gray's sword cutting down again. The sword left a deep wound on his shoulder. Although it was serious, it was not fatal. What was truly fatal was the laws of time on the sword. His old body died because of the exhaustion of his lifespan. Not only that, but his body was also rapidly decaying. To be sent to guard this place, the dark-skinned man was naturally not weak. Although he was only at the first level of magic light, he was still a magic light. His strength was enough for him to become one of the leaders of a regular organization. It was only in a peak organization like the Radiant Saint Hall that his strength seemed ordinary. However, facing Gray, who had reached the second level of the King Realm and whose laws of time had increased in power, the first level of magic light was clearly not enough. It must be known that when Gray was at the first level of the King Realm, he could already use the laws of time to crush opponents at the first level of magic light, let alone now. Just as the dark-skinned man attacked Gray, on the other side, the black-haired man attacked Derek. The battle ended even faster than Gray's side. Standing near Gray, Derek's speed reached a level that few people in Demon Light could match, thanks to the support of the time ability. The saber in his hand slashed out with lightning speed, much faster than the black-haired man. The black-haired man's movements seemed to be in slow motion in front of him. He slashed towards the black-haired man's throat. Puff! The bright blade cut through the black-haired man's throat. Blood spurted out from the black-haired man's throat. He opened his mouth to say something, but he could only make gurgling sounds. Blood gushed out from his mouth. Patter! The man clutched his throat and fell to the ground. His eyes were filled with fear and despair as he stared at Derek. His body twitched as he struggled weakly. Who is it? With a loud roar, a crimson pillar of flame with a terrifyingly high temperature quickly attacked. Along the way, the temperature in the air rose sharply, as if it had been ignited, and there were explosive sounds. The highly condensed flames gave the pillar of flame a sense of substance. It was as if it was not made of flames, but some kind of red substance with a high temperature. Seeing this pillar of flame, Gray was greatly alarmed. He felt a sense of horror. The power of this pillar of flame was even greater than the attack of the Saintess after she used her blood skill. Even if it was not at the level of destruction, it was definitely at the highest level of power in magic light. Whoosh! Being grabbed by Derek, Gray quickly retreated, dodging far away. Splash! The crimson pillar of flame slashed past where Gray had been and crashed into the distance. Then, a horrifying scene appeared. With the crimson pillar of flame as the center, a 1,000-meter-long lake of lava appeared. The crimson liquid bubbled and emitted a pungent smell. Heat waves rolled, and the temperature in the air was enough to roast meat. Whoosh! 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 A total of 8 figures charged over, and one of them was the fastest. He was only slightly slower than Derek, who had been accelerated by time. This was a tall man. The man's face was bright red, but it was not the pink of a young girl's face. Instead, it was slightly red. His weapon was a pair of crimson gloves. The pillar of flame had just been thrown by him. He was the captain of this team, Marina. He was the first to arrive at where Gray had been. He saw 2 of his subordinates on the ground. One was already dead, and the other was still twitching, but he was not far from death. His face immediately became gloomy. He did not care about the lives of his subordinates. This team was just a stepping stone for him. With his strength, he would definitely leave this team and obtain a higher position in the future. What he cared about was the punishment these two people would face after their deaths. There would obviously be some punishment if there were casualties in the team, and this punishment would definitely affect his promotion. People from the Space-Time Temple? Marna looked at Gray and Derek with a gloomy face. His eyes seemed to spit fire. Clang! Gray's face was grave. With a wave of his hand, a green rune puppet appeared in front of him. This man's strength was definitely not something he could contend against. The only thing capable of contending against him was the green rune puppet. Rune puppet. Maruna's thick eyebrows trembled. A crimson radiance appeared on the gloves on his right hand, and then he threw a punch at Gray. Derek brought Gray to quickly dodge, but the green rune puppet was left behind by Gray, who gave the order to fight. Clang! The sound of a weapon being unsheathed rang out. The green rune puppet held its weapon in all four hands. Taking several steps forward, one of its blades chopped at the incoming crimson pillar of flame. Pooh! The crimson pillar of flame that was enough to turn 1,000 meters into a lake of lava was shattered by the blade. Blazing flames splashed in all directions, and wherever the flames touched, lava pits appeared one after another. I blocked it. Maruna's face was grave. Although the attack, just now, was not his full strength, its power was already enough to reach the 5th level of magic light. For the rune puppet in front of him to be able to block it, it meant that the battle strength of this rune puppet was at least at the 5th level of magic light. You guys go deal with those two. Leave this rune puppet to me. He ordered the remaining 7 members, while he himself quickly rushed towards the green rune puppet. Boom, boom, boom. As he rushed, a crimson radiance filled his left and right gloves. He punched out again and again in the air. Instantly, one after another, crimson pillars of flame attacked the green rune puppet. Pu. The green formation puppet used all 4 weapons, shattering one after another of the scarlet-red pillars of flame. With heavy footsteps, it similarly charged towards its opponent. Even if that man is not a warrior of destruction, he should not be far from it. I don't know if the rune puppet will be a match for him. Gray looked somewhat worriedly at the rune puppet that was already engaged in battle, before looking in another direction. 7 men and women rushed towards him with murderous intent in their eyes. Their positions formed a crescent shape, like a huge net coming towards him. He was like a prey caught in the net. You want to treat me as prey? Let's see if you're qualified. Gray sneered. Instead of retreating, he rushed straight towards the 7 people. He knew that he was not a match for the man with the flame ability, but against these 7 people, he did not think that he did not have the ability to fight. Whoosh! Under the acceleration of the law of time, he and Derek were like a streak of purple light, quickly approaching the rightmost person of the 7 people. The rightmost person of the 7 was a man who looked to be in his 40s. He held a battle axe in his hand, and his skin was a yellowish brown, like rock. It was not an illusion, but a fact. The opponent's ability should be of the earth attribute, and this earth attribute ability derived the ability to turn one's body into rock to strengthen the physical body. At this moment, the opponent's body was in rock form to strengthen the physical body's defense. Seeing Gray and Derek rushing towards him at a terrifying speed, his expression was grave. The battle axe suddenly chopped down, but not towards Gray and Derek. Instead, it chopped towards the ground beneath his feet. Under his chop, several thick cracks appeared on the ground that had been scorched dry by the sun. Then, from these cracks, thick spikes that were more than 10 meters long shot out one after another, shooting towards Gray and Derek. Even with the speed of Gray and Derek, it was impossible for them to avoid such a dense attack. Pung, pung, pung. Facing the incoming spikes, Gray's mouth flashed with a cold smile. He and Derek did not dodge and directly collided with the spikes. One after another, the spikes hit him and Derek. Not only were they unable to injure him and Derek, but they were also unable to slow down their movement speed. Creating so many spikes in one attack indeed made it impossible for him and Derek to dodge. But at the same time, it also weakened the power of the spikes. With their powerful defense, he and Derek did not need to dodge at all. Very quickly, he and Derek had already rushed out of the range of the spikes and approached the man who used the Earth attribute ability. Be careful! Seeing Gray and Derek approaching the man who used the Earth attribute ability, the others shouted a warning and tried to stop them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several thick shadow tentacles with sharp tips thrust towards Gray and Derek like giant spears. Sonic booms sounded out as they pierced through the air. For someone to be able to display such a powerful attack, their boundary definitely wasn't just at the first level of demon light. Ka-ka-ka. Terrifying ice spread along the ground, leaving a layer of ice along the way. Crackle, crackle. The surging purple lightning was like a huge spear piercing towards them. The power it contained had already surpassed the first level of magic light. Hiss, hiss. The dark green fog condensed and turned into a huge snake that chose people to devour, leaving traces of corrosion along the way as it attacked. Facing the siege of 6 magic light warriors, and 2 of them were clearly mixed with magic light warriors who were not only at the first level of magic light, Gray tried to break through with his speed, but did not succeed. He could only temporarily retreat with Derek. Chapter 622. Be careful. It's very likely that his ability is related to the laws of time. Don't let him get close to you, and don't get hit by his ability. A middle-aged woman warned sternly. She had just carefully observed one of her companions who had died. His death seemed to have been caused by the laws of time's ability. Last time, the Holy Maiden had encountered someone from the space-time temple who possessed the laws of time. The Radiant Temple had already warned them, so she immediately thought of the ability. The laws of time. The other 6 people's faces turned cold. In particular, the man with the earth element showed a trace of lingering fear. Fortunately, he had not allowed the opponent to get close to him. Otherwise, even if he had not died, he would have suffered a fate worse than death. His lifespan had been stripped away, and he did not have much of it left. He would only have a few years left to live, and he would only be able to wait for death and despair. This was something he did not want to experience. Facing 7 magic light at once really is a little troublesome. Gray raised an eyebrow as he retreated to open up some distance from the 7 people. Fighting 7 magic light at once was more than twice as difficult as fighting 3 magic light at once. The most troublesome part was that there were 2 people who were not at the first level of magic light. They hid among the other magic light like the fangs of a venomous snake, ready to bite him at any time. But this is still within my expectations. Gray's eyes were filled with coldness and determination. Before he had decided to force his way in, he had already guessed that this battle would not be easy. The Radiant Temple was a peak organization in the Origin world. Even if they had been misled into thinking that the Golden Sword had fallen into the hands of the Space-Time Temple, which had weakened the forces stationed here, the forces they had left behind would still be extremely powerful. As a result, he knew from the very beginning that this battle would not be easy. Now that he was surrounded by 7 magic light, it was completely within his expectations. It was not even the most dangerous situation he had anticipated. Swish! Gray and Derek turned into streaks of purple light and charged towards the 7 people again. Don't let him get close. Seeing Gray and Derek pouncing towards them, the 7 of them were filled with fear. Their Blood Fiends continuously attacked Gray and Derek. Streaks of Blood Fiends' abilities covered the ground like a carpet, causing dirt and rocks to fly everywhere. The ground was violently overturned by the Blood Fiends' abilities of various attributes, creating a complete mess. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Gray's figure moved erratically as he dodged the attacks of the 7 people. His gaze swept across the 7 people one by one, looking for a suitable target to break through. He was like a predator baring his sharp fangs, ready to choose his prey. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he confirmed his target. Whoosh! He and Derek quickly rushed towards an old lady. The old lady looked to be in her 60s, her body was shriveled, and the wrinkles on her body were very obvious. Her ability was ice, and she should be at the first level of magic light. Kaka! Seeing Gray and Derek pouncing towards her, the old lady was shocked. The sense of danger made her break out in cold sweat. She pushed her ice ability to the limit, and a huge and thick ice wall rose from the ground to block in front of her, while she retreated continuously. Gray swung his sword down, and a streak of purple light streaked across the ice wall. Gray and Derek quickly passed through the ice wall and chased after the old lady. "Be careful!" Seeing this, the other 6 magic light experts quickly intercepted Gray. Streaks of Blood Fiend's abilities blocked his path, and violent explosions forcibly cut off Gray's path, separating Gray from the old lady. At this moment, Gray's mouth revealed a trace of a strange smile. He suddenly turned sideways and quickly rushed in another direction. In that direction, there was a man with a petrified appearance. It was the man with the earth ability that Gray wanted to attack at first. His target from the beginning was this man. The old lady was a fake target that he had chosen to mislead the 7 people and catch the man with the earth ability off guard. Gray and Derek were quickly approaching. The man with the earth ability had a serious expression, and cold sweat kept slipping down his cheeks. Holding the battle axe with both hands, he slashed down fiercely. A yellow light turned into a small mountain completely formed by the earth ability and crashed towards Gray and Derek. He kept retreating, but his speed was slower than the old lady's by a lot. His speed was considered slow in magic light, and this was why Gray had targeted him. Under normal circumstances, it would be more difficult to kill a person with a petrified body and a strong defensive ability than the old lady. However, Gray's ability of the Law of Time deprived one's lifespan. To a certain extent, it ignored defense, and the strength of the opponent's defense did not matter much. "We've been tricked." Seeing Gray immediately give up on the old lady and change his target to the man with the earth ability, the other 6 people's faces were gloomy. They knew that things were not good, and quickly moved to save the man with the earth ability, preventing Gray from approaching him. However, it was too late. Kacha! A purple light flashed, and the small mountain formed by the man with the earth ability collapsed. In an instant, Gray and Derek caught up with the man with the earth ability. Whoosh! Purple light surrounded the long sword, and Gray's sword slashed at the man with the earth ability's throat. However, the man with the earth ability dodged, and the sword slashed at his chest. Puff! The petrified skin was cut, and a wound appeared. Blood dripped down. Unsurprisingly, the injury was only average. The man with the earth ability was protected by his strong defense, and he was not seriously injured by Gray's sword. However, the Law of Time also spread to the man with the earth ability through the place of contact. The man with the earth ability was originally in his 40s, but he quickly aged. His hair turned white, and the wrinkles on his face were like ravines. A heavy feeling came to the man with the earth ability. He felt as if his body was no longer his, and it became difficult for him to move. He staggered, and his body fell to the ground. The moment he fell, he saw the sword wrapped in purple light attack him again. No! He let out a frightened and desperate roar, and his eyes, which had become old, glared at Gray. His face was full of unwillingness. Puff! The purple sword didn't stop descending because of his roar. Once again, it slashed at his chest, forming a cross in front of his chest. Then, he clearly felt his life being taken away. His eyelids became very heavy, and his body was sent flying. After falling to the ground, he was no longer alive. He was already dead before he hit the ground. At this time, the angry attacks of the other 6 people arrived. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The violent blood fiends bombarded the place where Gray and Derek were. The ground was continuously rolled over by the blood fiends, and there were traces of various abilities. As for Gray and Derek, they had already dodged far away before the ability could reach them. Damn it! Looking at the man with the earth ability who had turned into a rotten corpse, the remaining 6 people clenched their fists. Their faces were so gloomy that it seemed as if water could drip from them. Their eyes were filled with anger and a trace of fear. Anger was because their companion who had been with them day and night had been killed, and fear was because they were afraid of what would happen to them in the near future. Their companion who had turned into a rotten corpse was likely to be their end. It's your turn. On a slightly protruding rock, Gray and Derek appeared. They looked at the 6 people with endless coldness, and it was a coldness that seemed to be able to devour them. Whoosh! Gray and Derek rushed towards the 6 people again. Although the death of one person did not weaken them much, it did weaken them a little. It was easier for Gray to deal with them. Patter! After several rounds of fighting, Gray seized the opportunity again. The middle-aged woman with the poison ability was stripped of her life, and her corpse fell to the ground. Patter! With only 5 people left, the pressure on Gray was greatly reduced. The 5 of them immediately felt an immense pressure. After several exchanges, the old lady with the ice ability also collapsed due to her lifespan being taken away. Patter, patter! Soon, another 2 people died. Of the 7 people who had besieged him, only 2 were left. These 2 were also the strongest among the 7, and their battle strength was not only at the first level of the Magic Light School. Whoosh! Being stared at by Gray, the 2 felt a terrifying chill. Sweat flowed down, and their hair was stuck together. Completely losing the will to fight, the 2 quickly approached the place where the man with the fire ability was fighting. At this moment, only he could save them. Pu. Unfortunately, facing Derek's speed, the 2 could not escape at all. Their bodies were injured, and their bodies became old. In the end, like the other 5, they died of old age. Looking at the 2 corpses that had turned into rotten corpses, Gray shook his head. Did he have any enmity with the 7 of them? Of course not. The 7 of them were only stationed outside the plane under the orders of the Radiant Saint Hall. They had never entered the plane, so naturally they did not have any enmity with Gray. But very unfortunately, the opposing forces made the 6 of them stand against Gray. The 6 of them were from the Radiant Saint Hall, and the Radiant Saint Hall was Gray's enemy, so the 6 of them had to die. Of course, by the same logic, if he was not as strong as the 6 of them, he would be the one lying on the ground right now. So he did not feel guilty at all. No longer thinking about this, Gray looked towards the direction of the battle between the Azure Rune Puppet and the man with the fire ability. Although the battle between him and the 7 of them had an effect on the battle, it was not the greatest. The battle between the Azure Rune Puppet and the man with the fire ability had the greatest impact on the battle. That was the key to whether or not they could destroy the people of the Radiant Saint Hall and break through the Radiant Saint Hall's blockade. You deserve to die. Just as Gray looked in the direction of the battle between the Azure Rune Puppet and the man with the fire ability, Marina also looked in Gray's direction. His face was ashen, having already discovered that the 7 people surrounding Gray had been killed. He glared angrily at Gray and smashed his gauntlets on the ground. The ground in front of him was immediately melted by the terrifying heat, turning into a lake of magma. Afterwards, the blazing magma actually wriggled and gathered in the magma lake, turning into a red python of magma, which collided with the Azure Rune Puppet. Pum! The Azure Rune Puppet was unable to block this attack. Under the impact of the scarlet python of magma, its body of over 100 tons was pushed back, leaving a mark on the ground. Chapter 623. Mixed Ability, Magma Ability. Seeing this crimson magma python, Gray's pupils shrank. The giant python wasn't just a simple condensation of fire energy. It also had the ability of earth. This was a magma ability that was a mixture of earth and fire. In other words, the man who was previously thought to have fire energy actually had both earth and fire energy. He was a person who cultivated a hybrid blood technique, and the other party had relied on this mixed blood method to suppress the Green Rune Puppet, causing it to be at a disadvantage in the battle. You actually have the ability of time. It seems that you are the guy that Her Highness the Saintess met. If I kill you, my merits will definitely outweigh my faults. I might even be promoted to a deacon. Staring at Gray with a gloomy gaze, Maruna's voice was cold and somewhat excited. As someone who had been tested to have the ability to adapt to mixed ability, he had been implanted with the magma mixed ability by the temple, becoming one of the few elite blood warriors in the temple with mixed ability. As an elite blood warrior, his battle strength was far beyond his realm, and he could fight above his realm. Having reached the 5th level of Magic Light, he could rely on his magma ability to fight on par with a destruction warrior. It was for this reason that he had a dispute with the deacon who had been stationed here with the strength of a destruction warrior. Their battle strength was equal. So why was the other party suppressing him and ordering him around? The annihilation of his subordinates made him angry, but the opportunity to be promoted to a deacon made him excited. With the ability of time, the other party must be a core disciple of the temple of time and space. Perhaps he was this generation's holy son of the temple of time and space. As long as he killed the other party, he would definitely gain great merits and be rewarded to become a deacon. His status would be on the same level as the guy who had ordered him around before. Clang, clang. The green rune puppet that had been knocked back took heavy steps and pounced on him again. Let's get rid of this rune puppet first. He looked at the green rune puppet again. With the green rune puppet entangling him, he could not free himself. He needed to get rid of the rune puppet first before he could deal with the other party. Whoosh! The crimson lava python twisted its enormous body, turning the ground into lava along the way. Under its control, it chased after the green formation puppet, using its body that was even larger than the green formation puppet's to slam into the green formation puppet. Bang, bang, bang. The green formation puppet was forced back again and again, its battle strength completely suppressed. Although its metallic body was tough, under the terrifying heat of the magma, it slowly began showing signs of melting. I'm in trouble. Gray sensed an ill omen. The person before him, who should be the captain of the Radiant St. Hall's battle prowess, was ridiculously powerful. Even the Azure Talisman puppet was at a disadvantage. If this continued, the Azure Talisman puppet would definitely be defeated, and he would be in danger then. Although he could use the random teleportation orb to escape before the rune puppet was defeated, it was still not safe. He had no idea how far the random teleportation orb could transport him or whether he could escape the Radiant St. Hall's territory. If he still ended up in the Radiant St. Hall's territory, it would be extremely dangerous. The man with the magma ability would definitely report back to the Radiant St. Hall. The Radiant St. Hall would definitely search for him. It would not be difficult for a peak organization like the Radiant St. Hall to search for him now that they knew his appearance. He would face great danger as well. The best method was to wipe out all the people of the Radiant St. Hall station here, so that the Radiant St. Hall would not know what had happened here. Even if they searched, they would not know where to go. Moreover, this runic puppet was prepared by Gray to replace him in guarding the planar barrier. It could not be destroyed here. Otherwise, even if he managed to escape, the planar barrier would be destroyed. Swish! After understanding this, Gray and Derek were enveloped in purple light and quickly rushed towards the man with the magma ability. Although it was very difficult, they had to kill him here today. Futile struggle. Sensing Gray and Derek's approach, a sliver of contempt appeared on Marina's face. Pum! He lightly stomped on the ground, and from the lava lake not far away, the lava immediately formed into spears, whistling as they attacked Gray and Derek. Although these spears only possessed a portion of his battle prowess because he had to maintain the magma python, he felt that it was enough to deal with his opponent. Pu. Every spear formed from magma possessed power that far exceeded that of ordinary magic light. They whistled down with destructive power and stabbed into the ground, immediately leaving behind deep holes with clearly melted edges. Swish, swish, swish. Caught by Derek, Gray dodged continuously, brushing past the magma spears several times. Although the heat did not injure him, it made him sweat profusely. Sweat constantly flowed out from all the pores on his body. If not for Derek's speed, who knew how many times he would have died by now. With his speed, he could not dodge these magma spears, and with his defense, he could not block these magma spears. He dodged the magma spears time and time again, wandering around the man with the magma ability. Suddenly, his eyes exploded with intense, killing intent. Now, a purple light attacked the man with the magma ability. Gray approached the man with the magma ability as close as he could while ensuring his own safety. Swish! The purple light was dazzling and beautiful, full of the strange aura of the law of time, quickly approaching the man with the magma ability. Seeing the purple light getting closer and closer to the man with the magma ability, Gray's heartbeat could not help but accelerate. Although the man with the magma ability had reached the level of destruction, his lifespan should still be at the level of magic light. As long as he was hit by the purple light, he would lose a lot of his life. Even if he did not die, he would inevitably lose half of his life. Suddenly, just as the purple light was about to hit the man with the magma ability, the man with the magma ability, Marna, suddenly turned his head. His face was full of undisguised contempt, as if he was laughing at Gray's futile struggle at this time. Walala! He stomped his foot on the ground, and the ground turned into magma. Then a wall of magma rose up in front of him, protecting him within. Pung! The purple light hit the magma wall. The magma wall quickly cooled and turned into stone and showed severe weathering. But the purple light was completely blocked. Gray's attack, which he had been preparing for a long time, had failed at the very last moment. Do not rush. Destroy this rune puppet, and then it will be your turn. With a cold smile on his face, Marna looked at Gray as if he was looking at a trapped beast. Pang! It was like it was responding to his words. In the next moment, the giant magma snake hit. A giant body fell in front of Gray. It was the green rune puppet. The metal armor on the surface had obvious signs of melting. It looked a bit deformed. It could not last much longer. This guy's power must be at the level of destruction. Gray's face looked serious. The green rune puppet's power should be very close to Annihilation class. Even if it was at the 5th level of magic light, it should have been able to beat it, but the man used a mixed power of 2 elements to make him at the level of Annihilation class. His power suppressed the green rune puppet. Dong! The green rune puppet got up. It was going to attack the magma power man again. Gray hesitated. He jumped and landed on the green rune puppet's shoulder. Under the continuous attacks of the giant magma snake, the green rune puppet's surface temperature was very high. Standing on its body was like standing on a soldering iron. Gray felt as if his whole body was being roasted. BZZT. Enduring the heat, Gray used his time acceleration power. This time, the purple light did not just cover him. It also covered the green rune puppet under his feet. The blurry purple light expanded an extremely large area before completely enveloping the green formation puppet. However, the purple light at this time was somewhat trembling, constantly flickering, as if it would collapse at any moment. When he thought of using the time acceleration ability on the corpse, Gray naturally also thought of using the time acceleration ability on the green rune puppet. Therefore, he made an attempt to do so. The result was difficult. The green rune puppet was too large. If he wanted to use time acceleration power on it, he had to expand the range of time acceleration power by dozens of times. The expansion of the range made it difficult for Gray to control the time acceleration power. This was why the purple light that shrouded the green rune puppet was shaking and flickering. It was like it was going to collapse at any moment. It was not like it, but a fact. Such a large range had exceeded the limit of Gray's control of time acceleration power. He could withdraw from this state at any time. Dong! Dong! Heavy steps were taken. The green rune puppet strode toward the magma power man. Although its body was heavy, its steps were huge. This made its speed not too slow. Under the acceleration of the time rule power, this speed that was not too slow suddenly increased by several times. Shrouded in purple light, the green rune puppet rushed toward the magma power man at an extremely terrifying speed. He can actually use time rule power on a rune puppet. Seeing the green rune puppet's frightening speed, Maruna's face finally showed a trace of seriousness. Walala! Under his control, the magma python twisted its huge body. Wherever it passed, the ground turned into magma. It quickly hit the green rune puppet. Pung! Before the magma python hit, the green rune puppet squatted down under Gray's control. It stomped on the ground, and its huge body shot into the air. It avoided the magma python and quickly fell toward the magma power man. The weapons in its 4 hands were waved at the magma power man. At the same time, the purple light on the surface of the green rune puppet flickered faster and faster. Gray could no longer maintain time acceleration on such a large range. The time acceleration had reached the edge of collapse. Chapter 6:24. Walala! Seeing the rapidly falling green rune puppet, the man with the magma ability, Maruna, had a shocked expression on his face. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead as he stamped his foot, causing a magma wall to rise from the ground as he quickly dodged backwards. Puff, puff, puff. Under the cyan rune puppet's 4 weapons, the magma wall was torn to pieces in an instant. Facing Gray's attack, Maruna could use his magma ability to create a magma wall to defend while controlling the magma python. But facing the cyan rune puppet's attack, this magma wall was obviously not enough. Crossing the collapsed magma wall, the cyan rune puppet caught up with Maruna after a few steps. 2 swords and 2 blades, a total of 4 weapons, slashed towards Maruna. Puff! Maruna dodged 3 of the weapons, but was swept by the last one. A deep wound appeared on his abdomen, and he was sent flying backwards. Pata! The cyan rune puppet was preparing to chase after Maruna, who was sent flying backwards. At this moment, the purple light that shrouded the cyan rune puppet suddenly collapsed, and the cyan rune puppet retreated from the acceleration. Having lost the acceleration of the time rule ability, the cyan rune puppet's speed was obviously slower. Compared to its previous speed, its current speed was like a snail. Who? On the cyan rune puppet's shoulder, Gray, who had exceeded his limit and used the time rule ability, consumed a lot of energy. His complexion was slightly pale, but he let out a long sigh of relief in his heart. He was extremely worried that the time acceleration ability would collapse in advance before he could attack Maruna. Fortunately, such a thing did not happen. Only after attacking Maruna did the time acceleration ability collapse. Clang, clang, clang. The cyan rune puppet chased after Maruna. The cyan rune puppet had already lost the time acceleration ability, and the overload ability made Gray unable to use the time acceleration ability on the cyan rune puppet for a short period of time. With Maruna's speed, the cyan rune puppet absolutely could not catch up. Fortunately, Maruna was already seriously injured. Cough, cough. In a huge pothole, Maruna coughed violently, coughing up blood from time to time. There was a deep wound on his abdomen that almost split him in half. Blood flowed out from the huge wound, leaving a large puddle on his body. Not only that, but his internal organs were also severely injured by the saber. He covered the wound on his abdomen with one hand and stood up with difficulty. The large amount of blood loss made his head slightly dizzy. He took out a bottle of advanced recovery potion from his space item, broke the bottle with one hand, and poured it into his mouth. With such a serious wound, if he did not receive timely treatment, he would most likely die here today. Whoosh! Suddenly, a snow-white blade slashed towards him. The speed was not too fast. Normally, he would have been able to dodge it easily. However, due to his heavy injuries and the massive loss of blood, his body had become sluggish, and he was unable to dodge in time. Pong! The snow-white blade slashed his body. The power was not too strong, and with his current body's defense, he could withstand it. However, his body could not help but stagger. He subconsciously clenched his fist, and the advanced recovery potion in his hand shattered with a kacha sound, and the potion splashed everywhere. Scram! He flew into a rage, and with a punch, Derek, who had slashed out with the snow-white blade, was sent flying. The sensation from his fist made him slightly stunned. His opponent was actually not injured by his punch. As an existence who had reached the 5th level of magic light, even if it was just the strength of his physical body, it was already extremely powerful. If it was an existence at the 1st level of magic light, his punch would definitely have been seriously injured, but his opponent was not injured at all. He did not have time to think about why, nor did he have time to take out another advanced recovery potion. Covering his wound, he hurriedly used his magma ability and used the magma to form a defensive wall in front of him. However, before the magma wall could be formed, a sense of danger attacked his heart. Knowing that it was too late, he gave up on using the magma to form a defensive wall and hurriedly jumped to the side. Puff! At the place where he had been, a green long sword slashed past, and a long crack appeared on the ground, extending far away. The rune puppet had arrived and attacked him. Swish, swish, swish. Following closely behind the green longsword were 3 other weapons. Covering his wound and enduring the intense pain, He dodged continuously, but the heavy injuries and the large loss of blood had already seriously affected his condition. Rip! One of the huge blades slashed across his back, leaving a long, bloody mark. His entire body was struck by a huge force, and his body was sent flying while lying on his back, rolling a few times on the ground. Pung! Injured once again, Marna felt his body become even heavier. He crawled up with difficulty, his head slightly dizzy. Exerting all his strength, he kicked off the ground, and his body shot up into the air. At this moment, he no longer had any thoughts of killing Gray to obtain the reward from the temple. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to escape. Compared to life, nothing was worth mentioning, at least to him. The rune puppet's body was cumbersome, and it did not have any long-range attacks. As long as he escaped into the air, he would be able to successfully escape. Suddenly, he felt a dark cloud above his head obstructing his vision. Raising his head, he saw that the huge body of the rune puppet had also leapt into the air at some unknown time, and 4 weapons were slashing towards him. Swish! As he was in the air, he had no way of using his magma ability, because his magma ability required the support of earth and rocks. He could only use the Scarlet Flame Pillar to attack the Green Rune Puppet. Unfortunately, under the 4 sharp blades of the Green Rune Puppet, the Scarlet Flame Pillar immediately dissipated, and the Green Rune Puppet continued to slash at him. No! Cold sweat dripped from his forehead, and his feet stomped to the side, squeezing the air to produce a fierce whistling sound. His body quickly dodged to the side. Puff! He dodged quickly, but the speed at which the green formation puppets slashed down was not slow either. He was once again struck by a giant green blade, and his body fell from the air to the ground, heavily smashing into the ground and creating a huge crater. Marino was heavily injured again, and many of his bones were shattered. Lying in the huge pit, Marino struggled to get up. He tried several times, but to no avail. Lying in the huge pit, he was like a dying fish. Clang, clang, clang. The huge footsteps of the rune puppet were nearing, sounding like a death knell in his ears. With great difficulty, he turned the ground into magma, forming a huge python of magma to protect his surroundings, and finally blocked the rune puppet. Lying on the ground, he could feel his body rapidly weakening and becoming cold following the loss of blood. He wanted to take out a high-grade healing medicine, but with his heavily injured body that had sunk into numbness, he could not even do such a thing. And he felt that even if he consumed a high-grade healing medicine, it was very likely that it would not have much of an effect. His current injuries were just too severe. Although the effects of high-grade healing medicine were powerful, it was not something that could heal all serious injuries. Unable to break through the python of magma, Gray simply called back the green rune puppet. Standing at the edge of the crater, he coldly looked at Marna lying in the center of the crater. He was extremely clear on what kind of injuries Yi Futian had suffered. Without any accidents, Yi Futian would definitely die, unless he had the ability to use the laws of light like the Holy Maiden of the Radiant Temple, able to instantly heal his injuries. Several minutes later, the python of magma collapsed. Already on the verge of death, Marna could not even use his abilities. Clang, clang. Gray brought the green rune puppet forward, approaching Marna. Maruna's eyelids were trembling, and the heaviness of his body made him want to close his eyes, but he forced himself to not close them. Save me. His face was filled with both hatred and hope. His desire to live made him cast aside his humiliation. He was currently pleading for his enemy, Gray, to save him. In response, Gray's expression was ice-cold as he gave the order to the runic puppet. The runic puppet raised its sword and stabbed towards Maruna's heart. Spurt! With his heart pierced, Maruna's dying body was completely dead. Gray could sense that his body temperature was rapidly plummeting through his infrared senses. After storing Yi Futian's corpse in his spatial pouch, Gray went to the corpses of the other 9 people. He looted all of their weapons and spatial items before looking at a nearby building. In the building, he felt a pair of eyes peeking at him. He knew that there was someone inside. It should be someone in charge of logistics. He had nothing to say about it. He gave Derek the order to kill, and Derek quickly dashed towards the building. A while later, the building collapsed, and there was not a single person left alive in the building. Blood could be seen in the ruins from time to time. If these people were allowed to survive, the battle before would have been meaningless. Gray turned around, breaking through the barrier and returning to the realm. Near the barrier, the people from the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom were all worried. They glanced at the pitch-black barrier from time to time. Although they knew that Gray was extremely powerful, they knew even more about the strength of the enemy they were facing this time. The Radiant Saint Hall was extremely terrifying. Even in the Origin world, they were one of the most powerful organizations. Fighting against an organization like that, even if it was just fighting against the people stationed here, would be extremely dangerous in their eyes. It could even be said that their chances of victory were not great. However, they were unwilling to say that out loud. There was a saying that good things did not come true, but bad things did. They were afraid that if they said that out loud, their chances of victory would be wiped out. The planar barrier shook, and everyone's eyes turned to the planar barrier. As the plane barrier trembled, a hole appeared. Then, two figures stepped out from a hole. The person in the lead was dressed in black battle attire. An old man followed behind him. They were Gray and Derek. Gray, Sir Gray. Everyone could not help but rejoice. Sophia, Francis, and the others who were close to Gray quickly went up. Their faces were filled with joy. Regardless of the outcome, at least Gray was fine. Chapter 6:25. Gray, how's it going? How's the situation outside? After a careful inspection, Sophia discovered that although Gray was in a sorry state, he wasn't injured. She heaved a sigh of relief and asked, I've already killed all the people from the Radiant Saint Hall stationed outside. Gray spat out a mouthful of turbid air and said, You've already killed all the people from the Radiant Saint Hall stationed outside? Hearing Gray's words, many people sucked in a cold breath. Although Gray made it sound easy, everyone could not help but sense the danger involved. How could the people sent by the Radiant Saint Hall be weak? It was only natural for them to possess existences on the level of Mo Guan. Moreover, they probably possessed existences that surpassed ordinary Mo Guan in battle prowess. For Gray to be able to annihilate all of these people, although he must have borrowed the strength of the Blue Rune puppet, he must have also experienced a thrilling battle. After all, there must have been more than one Demon Shine station outside. Gray, do you plan on entering the Origin world next? Only a while later did everyone return to their senses. Francis looked at Gray and asked, Yes, I plan on entering the Origin world. The cultivation conditions there are much better than this realm, so I plan on using the cultivation conditions there to grow. I'll leave behind the talisman puppet for you to fend off the invasion of the Radiant Saint Hall. Gray nodded. He had already considered this from the very beginning. He did not want his home to be blocked, so he wanted to use the cultivation conditions of the Origin world to grow quickly so that he could fend off the Radiant Saint Hall. Gray, I have a request. Francis looked at Gray, and there seemed to be some kind of determination in his eyes. What is it? Gray looked at Francis in surprise. This was the first time Francis had made a request of him since they became friends. Can you take me with you when you go to the Origin world? Francis's voice was filled with determination. Gray did not want his home to be blocked. When had he ever wanted his home to be blocked? This was a form of humiliation. If his home was blocked, it meant that he was still very weak. The Fifth Organization and the Radiant Saint Hall had shown him how weak he was. His heart was filled with the desire to become stronger long ago. Gray had killed the people of the Radiant Saint Hall stationed outside, so it was the perfect opportunity for him to leave the realm and search for fortuitous encounters in a wider world. As a result, he made this request to Gray shamelessly. Gray was a little hesitant. With his relationship with Francis, he generally wouldn't refuse, but the other party's request made him a little unsure whether he should agree or not. He looked at Francis and said solemnly, If you want to escape from the Radiant Temple, you have to use a random teleportation orb. I don't know how many people it can teleport. If you're alone, then you can only use the random teleportation orb to teleport alone. You and I will most likely be teleported to different places. I can't guarantee your safety. That's enough. I hope you can give me this opportunity, Francis said with a smile. Gray could not help but look at Diphony Violet and the other higher-ups of the Purple Moon Kingdom. Although they were surprised by Francis's decision, they had no intention of stopping him. "All right then, Your Excellency Gray, please give me a chance as well." A fragrance wafted over as a beautiful woman walked forward. The woman was tall and slender, and her words and actions were filled with a heroic spirit. Not only did she not seem out of place, but she had a different kind of beauty. She was the Gemstone Queen, Glenwy Austin. As the queen and the future successor of the Jewel Kingdom, she possessed a spirit that was not weaker than any man. Francis lamented his weakness and was eager to become stronger. She was the same. She also deeply understood that entering the origin world was an opportunity to become stronger, so she asked Gray. "Me too." Sophia took a step forward. Her beautiful body was almost pressed against Gray. Her black pearl-like eyes looked at Gray. There was no playfulness on her face, only seriousness. "You have to think carefully. The origin world is definitely not a good place. You might even encounter danger during the teleportation process." Gray frowned. He glanced at the Gemstone Queen, Glenwy Austin, and finally fixed his gaze on Sophia. His eyes were filled with worry. "I've already thought it through. If possible, please let me go to the origin world as well." Gemstone Queen Glenwy Austin's voice was resolute and decisive. "Me too." Sophia met Gray's gaze. She did not avoid his gaze. Instead, she was serious like never before. After handing the runic puppet over to Diphony Violet, Gray broke through the planar barrier and entered the origin world again. Sophia, Francis, and Glenwy Austin were with him. He was very reluctant to let Sophia go to the origin world because it was extremely dangerous. However, this was Sophia's decision. Sophia was not a bird in a cage. She had her own thoughts and thoughts. She was an independent individual. He could not restrict her with his thoughts. After she had made her decision, the only thing he could do was support her. For this reason, he gave her the black battle armor and the golden spear that he had obtained from the Radiant Saint Hall to increase her battle prowess and ability to protect herself. Although the black battle armor had been damaged in the battle with the Saintess, it could be repaired with magic crystals. It had now been completely repaired. Although the black battle armor could no longer keep up with him, it was definitely an excellent piece of defensive equipment for Sophia. Of course, he also gave Francis and Glenwy Austin life-saving means. They were respectively given a gold-ranked spear and a gold-ranked battle axe. This is the Flamestone Desert of the origin world. After passing through the planar barrier, Gray's group of 4 stood on land, scorched by the sun. Sophia and the others had already heard about the situation here from Gray, so they knew where they were right now. Very soon, Sophia and the others saw the traces of the battle in the surroundings. The traces of destruction were vicious and terrifying. There were bottomless cracks, craters that seemed to have been created by huge meteors, lakes formed from magma. The magma lakes had not solidified yet and were still bubbling. They could sense the terrifying temperature and smell the burnt smell from afar. The 3 of them could not help but shiver inside. They gained a better understanding of the battle from before. "Let me go first." Francis took a deep breath to calm his rapidly beating heart. At the most critical moment, although he had already made a firm decision, his heart could not help but beat wildly. He took out the black crystal ball that Gray had given him and swept his gaze across Gray's group. He nodded slightly and pressed the crystal ball with an indomitable aura. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the black crystal ball shattered. The moment the black crystal ball shattered, black fog spread out and turned into a black sphere that enveloped Francis. Gray and the others standing beside Francis were repelled. Asterisk swish. Asterisk the black sphere floated up, and a black vortex appeared beside it. Then, the black sphere entered the black vortex and disappeared with it. A black crystal ball can only teleport one person. Needless to say, Gray's group already understood that a black crystal ball could only teleport one person. Francis had used himself as an experiment to prove this point to Gray's group. "Let's meet again if fate wills it." The Gemstone Queen gracefully bid farewell to Gray and Sophia in the style of a noble. Similarly, she crushed the black crystal ball without any hesitation. A moment later, she disappeared from where she was. "Be careful." Gray and Sophia looked at each other and communicated through their gazes. They did not need to say anything. Afterwards, the two of them crushed the black crystal ball at the same time. With two flashes of black light, the two of them disappeared from where they were. Several days later, in an information relay department of the Radiant Saint Hall. "What's going on? Why haven't the troops stationed in the Flamestone Gobi sent any fixed messages?" The various large organizations of the Origin world all possessed some long-distance communication methods built on rune technology. Through these methods, they could send written messages thousands of kilometers away. The various organizations used this method to confirm whether their scattered forces were all right. "Hurry up and notify the nearest troops. Get them to investigate immediately." Very soon, the news that the troops stationed outside the Flamestone Gobi had been completely wiped out reached the Radiant Saint Hall. This is the Space-Time Temple's counterattack. The upper echelon of the Radiant Saint Hall was furious when they heard the news. They immediately sent an elder to the Flamestone Gobi and began another confrontation with the Space-Time Temple. Chapter 626. Unaware that his actions had once again caused a conflict between the Temple of Light and the Temple of Space and Time, Gray crushed the random transfer orb. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already appeared in the mountains. The vegetation here was extremely dense, stretching as far as the eye could see. It was filled with an aura of desolation, and there were no traces of humans. The trees were extremely tall, reaching over 100 meters in height from time to time. It would take dozens of people to wrap their arms around a tree. Being in this kind of world was like being in a kingdom of giants. I wonder how the three of them are doing. Gray was very worried about the three of them, especially about Sophia's situation. However, he could only suppress this worry because he had no idea where they had been teleported to. Even if he worried about them, it would be pointless. Roar! With a deafening roar, the trees shook violently, and a 10-meter-long blood beast with crimson fur appeared. This was a tiger-type blood beast, the Crimson Flame Blood Tiger. It was a king-level blood beast with the ability to control fire. This was its territory, and Gray's teleportation had alarmed it. It had rushed over angrily, wanting to see just what kind of idiot dared to behave so atrociously in its territory. When it saw Gray, its huge crimson eyes flashed with an ominous glint. It opened its mouth wide enough to stuff several Grays inside, and a foul stench of rotting food wafted out, accompanied by crimson flames. Whoosh! A crimson flame rolled like a wave towards Gray. Gray's figure was incomparably small in front of this wave, and the Crimson Flame Blood Tiger, who had spat out this crimson flame, was already drooling. It was already imagining the scene of its prey being roasted to perfection. By chance, it had discovered that roasting its prey was more delicious than eating it raw, and it had become infatuated with this way of eating. The crimson flames swept over, and the wind that it stirred up caused Gray's black hair to flutter. Gray didn't move half a step, but his eyebrows were furrowed. Whoosh! He used a frigid wind blade that he hadn't used in a long time. A huge frigid wind blade appeared in front of him and slashed forward. Crack, crack! In front of this ice wind blade, the seemingly powerful scarlet flame was like a matchstick in the cold wind, extinguishing in an instant. The ice wind blade continued to slash forward, chopping into the Crimson Flame Blood Tiger's huge mouth. Puff! The frigid ice wind blade was like a sharp-boned chopping knife. Along with the splashing of blood, the Crimson Flame Blood Tiger's head was almost split into two halves. The huge body of the Crimson Flame Blood Tiger didn't even have time to struggle before it fell to the ground with a loud bang. Ice spread out and covered its entire body. Gray stepped forward and cut off one of the legs to prepare for today's food. The rest of the body parts were stored in the purple ring to replenish his food reserves. After inspecting the nearby area and confirming that there was no danger, Gray cleared out an empty space in the forest and picked up a bonfire. A huge leg that had been skinned and weighed at least a few hundred kilograms was placed over the bonfire to roast. Not long after, the huge leg turned golden. The golden fat dripped down, and an alluring fragrance filled the air. Sitting next to the bonfire, Gray had Derek stand guard in the surroundings. From time to time, he would turn over the huge leg and begin to check on the day's harvest. First, he checked the weapons of the 10 people he killed. As people from the Radiant Temple, the things they used naturally wouldn't be bad. The weapons of the 10 people were all gold-ranked weapons. However, other than the gloves of the man with the magma ability, the other 9 weapons should be extremely common among gold-ranked weapons. Gray suspected that these 9 weapons were the standard weapons of the Radiant Temple. Although they could be mass-produced, their power was very likely to be the lowest among weapons of the same rank. Then, Gray checked the spatial items of these people. Out of the 10 people's spatial items, only 7 of them were in his hands. 3 of them had already been gifted to Sophia, and the other 2. Among them, the spatial item of the man with the magma ability was a bracelet with close to 10,000 cubic meters of space. He had gifted it along with the items inside to Sophia. He checked the items in the remaining 7 spatial bags one by one. There were quite a lot of things. There were various types of magic potions, rune items for survival in the wild, and purple-black magic coins. Surprisingly, the size of the magic coins was exactly the same as the size of the magic coins of the 4 kingdoms. The magic coins of the 4 kingdoms were made according to the size of the magic coins of the Empire. Obviously, the Empire during the Empire was related to the Source World. These magic coins, together with the magic coins he had on him, added up to about 10 million. He didn't have much. Mainly the 7 people had more. He didn't see any gold or silver coins. He didn't know if gold or silver coins could still be circulated in this world. After checking the items in the 7 spatial bags, the aroma of the meat was so thick that it almost turned into a mist. Gray put everything away and began to eat heartily. He actually ate dozens of kilograms in one go. After finishing his dinner and putting away the rest, Gray took out a spatial bag and threw out a corpse. It was the corpse of the man with the magma ability, Marina. Compared to the other party, Derek's combat power was undoubtedly much weaker. Therefore, he decided to control the corpse to Marina. After a series of operations, at the cost of a large area of the forest withering, Marina's repaired body stood up and took over Derek's work. He also buried Derek's corpse while he was at it. According to the people of the Temple of Light, the conditions for cultivation in the Source World are very unique. The cultivation speed is several times faster than in the other planes. Standing in the open space, Gray began to cultivate the blood technique. Soon, the phantom of a giant lizard over 20 meters long appeared in the open space in the forest. The giant lizard was covered in black scales. When it stood up, it was several stories tall. Its thick and sturdy tail was full of sharp barbs. It was the magic light, rank demonic poison dragon. With the appearance of the demonic poison dragon, Gray quickly entered a state of cultivation. He immediately felt the difference between cultivation in the Source World and in the other planes. When he was cultivating the blood technique in the other planes, his body would feel a faint numbness. That was because his body was being washed and strengthened. But in the Source World, this numbness was several times stronger. He could clearly feel that the effects of cultivation had been strengthened. After 2 rounds of cultivation ended and entering the 3rd round of cultivation, Gray stopped cultivating when he felt that his body had reached its limit. Panting heavily, Gray took out a towel to wipe the sweat on his forehead. There was a trace of excitement on his face. The conditions for cultivation in the Source World really are much better than in the other planes. After just 1 round of cultivation, Gray could clearly feel that his body had improved. Although it was very small, he had indeed improved. The conditions for cultivation in the Source World were indeed much better than in the other planes. Even if he didn't use any supplementary cultivation medicine or the black crystal, he felt that his cultivation speed wouldn't be slower than when he had the supplementary cultivation medicine and the black crystal. No wonder the powerhouses in the Source World are so strong. Gray finally understood why the Source World had powerhouses that far surpassed the magic light rank. The unique cultivation conditions allowed the residents of the Source World to grow several times faster than the residents of the other planes. The difference of several times was enough for the residents of the Source World to leave the residents of the other planes far behind. Were people like Francis Galloway Austin and Sophia lacking in talent? To be able to stand out among their peers, their talent was definitely not lacking. Even in the source world where there was a large population base, their talent would definitely rank in the upper echelons. But even so, if they didn't leave the source world, their lifetime achievements would very likely stop at the triple metamorphosis regent level. It would be extremely difficult for them to become magic light. This was the influence of the environment. The environment affected the performance of their talent and blocked their path of improvement. Now that the three of them had left the plane and entered the source world, they had the same cultivation conditions as the residents of the source world. Gray was looking forward to seeing how far the three of them could grow. The next day, Gray randomly chose a direction and set off. His purpose in coming to the source world was only to make use of the source world's cultivation conditions. As for where he was going, he didn't have a clear goal, so he very casually chose a direction. There were no traces of humans in the dense forest, as if no humans had ever been here. In contrast, there were many different types of blood fiends. In just half a day, Gray encountered many blood fiends. Gray recognized some of them, but there were also some that Gray didn't recognize. The source world had more types of blood fiends than the other planes. Patter, patter. There was movement in front of him. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Gray quickly climbed up a huge tree and hid himself in the dense foliage of the huge tree. Not long after he climbed up the huge tree, the creature that caused the movement appeared in front of him. It was a giant tortoise with an earthy yellow shell. The shell of the giant tortoise was extremely large, covering an area of several hundred square meters. It was even larger than the average room. The giant tortoise bared its teeth, which looked extremely sharp. It didn't look docile at all. Instead, it looked extremely ferocious. Although it was a tortoise, its speed definitely couldn't be described as slow. Its thick legs could cover more than 10 meters with each stride. Instead of being slow, it was actually quite fast. What huge body! Could this be a disaster-level blood fiend whose combat power is comparable to a destruction warrior? Hiding in the dense foliage of the huge tree, Gray secretly guessed as he looked through the gaps of the leaves at the huge creature crawling towards him. In the realm of blood warriors, above the magic light level was the destruction level. In the realm of blood fiends, above the magic light level was the disaster level. The reason it was called the disaster level was because once a blood fiend of this level appeared, it would cause an unimaginable disaster. Gray suspected that the giant tortoise in front of him was a disaster-level blood fiend. Its body was really too big. Although the strength of a blood fiend was not necessarily proportional to its body size, in most cases, the strength of a blood fiend was proportional to its body size. Oh no, it found me. Suddenly, Gray was shocked to find that the giant tortoise's head turned. Its huge eyes were looking at the tree he was hiding in. Its eyes were clearly the eyes of a hunter who had discovered its prey. Chapter 6:27. The rock calamity tortoise's large eyes stared at a giant tree not far away. It had sensed the scent of its prey on that tree. As a disaster-level blood fiend, its 5 senses were extremely sharp. Even though it was not a blood fiend that specialized in smelling, its sense of smell was not any weaker than a blood fiend that specialized in smelling. It had sensed the scent of its prey on that giant tree. Thump! Thump, thump. Its large body turned and crawled towards the giant tree. Although it was crawling, its speed was definitely not slow. Gotcha! Its large head slammed into the giant tree, causing it to break apart with a gotcha sound. The upper part of the tree that was covered in branches and leaves fell towards the ground. Whoosh! Among the branches and leaves, Gray's figure dashed out and escaped into the distance. Boom! The rock calamity tortoise's 2 front limbs kicked up, causing its body to tilt slightly and half stand up. Its mouth was filled with sharp teeth as it bit towards Gray. It seemed that the giant mouth was about to swallow Gray whole. Whoosh! At the critical moment, Gray's figure twisted in the air and dodged the giant mouth, appearing on top of a giant tree in the distance. Marina appeared with him. At the critical moment, it was thanks to Maruna's speed that he was able to dodge the rock calamity tortoise's bite. Otherwise, Even if he used the law of time, he might not have been able to dodge the rock calamity tortoise's bite. Thump, thump, thump. The rock calamity tortoise was clearly very dissatisfied that its prey had escaped. It stomped on the ground with its thick legs, causing the ground to tremble violently under the rock calamity tortoise's stomps. Then, with the rock calamity tortoise as the center, the soil within a radius of several thousand meters began to churn. It was as if the soil had suddenly turned into a river, unable to support the trees that grew on its surface. A large number of trees collapsed, sank into the soil, and were buried underground by the churning soil. Naturally, the tree that Gray was standing on was also included. This tree was close to 50 meters tall, but in the next moment, it was swallowed up by a wave of soil that was more than 100 meters tall. Gray and Marna were both swept up in it. With such a large area of soil manipulation, its power was not inferior to Maruna's magma ability. This was indeed a disaster-level blood fiend. Puff! Maruna, who was wrapped in soil, punched out. Relying on the power of the 5th level of magic light, he punched a hole in the soil and rushed out with Gray, quickly rising into the sky. The best way to deal with a blood fiend that could not fly was to hide in the air. Roar! Seeing Gray and Marna escape again, the rock calamity tortoise roared. Its prey had escaped its pursuit twice in a row, making it, the overlord of this region, extremely furious. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A large amount of soil floated up and turned into rock balls with a diameter of several meters. They smashed towards Gray and Marna in the sky with terrifying power. Every rock had a terrifying, destructive power that even a mountain couldn't withstand. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the air, Marna quickly dodged left and right, dodging the rock balls. Although it was a close call, he still managed to reach a height of several thousand meters, where the rock balls could no longer reach him. His speed was already at the 5th level of magic light, and after being accelerated by the precept of time, his speed immediately jumped to the level of annihilation. Furthermore, it was not an ordinary annihilation level. It was because of this speed that he was able to dodge the huge and terrifying rock balls. Whoosh! With lingering fear, Gray looked down at the ground, which had changed greatly in a very short period of time. He ordered Marina to quickly retreat. A disaster-level blood fiend was not something he could deal with right now. After sprinting for more than 5 kilometers, Gray and Marna landed on the ground again, blending into the forest. Although they were sprinting at a height of several thousand meters and could avoid being attacked by land blood fiends, they would still be targeted by flying blood fiends. Just now, he had been attacked by several flying blood fiends. Fortunately, they were not very strong. The strongest was only at the level of magic light. They were killed by him to replenish his food supply. We have to be careful. The superior training conditions in the source world are not only for humans, but also for blood fiends. Gray wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He became cautious. Even with his strength, even with Maruna's powerful combat ability, he could be in great danger if he was not careful. Afterward, he became even more cautious. Every 500 kilometers, he would carve a teleportation mark in a secret place. Once he noticed a huge commotion, he would immediately avoid it instead of hiding and watching. The stronger the blood fiend, the more sensitive its senses were. Hiding was not necessarily safe. Although their speed was much slower, it was also much safer. At the same time, he deeply understood the dangers of this forest. The giant tortoise was not the only disaster-level blood fiend in this forest. After that, he encountered a few more terrifying blood fiends. There was a giant python whose head was as large as a locomotive and whose body was more than 100 meters long. Although he was far away, he could still feel the intense, killing intent emanating from this giant python. It was definitely a disaster-level blood fiend. Wherever it passed, the blood fiends would flee in droves. It would fall behind the fleeing beasts and devour them one bite at a time. There was a giant bird with golden feathers whose wingspan was more than 10 meters. It flew in the sky like a dark cloud. In its claws, it was holding the corpse of a magic light level blood fiend that was more than 20 meters long. There was a giant octopus that had mastered the ability to mix earth and water, the ability to create swamps. From afar, Gray saw it dragging a disaster-level giant beast into the mud. There was also a terrifying aura that could be felt from afar. Gray did not dare to spy on it. It was very likely that it was a giant beast that had surpassed the disaster level. Half a year later, Gray still had not walked out of this forest. He also did not see any traces of humans. Although they had slowed down due to caution, it was enough to see the vastness of this forest. Gray estimated that the vastness of this forest had already surpassed the original plane they were in. Gray cultivated as he hurried along. The excellent cultivation conditions allowed him to rapidly improve his strength. A few days ago, he had broken through to the 3rd stage of the king level. That was about to fall. Gray found a natural cave. He planned to settle down in this cave, but before that, he had to carefully investigate his surroundings to make sure that there were no blood fiends that could threaten him. With Marina in tow, Gray began to investigate a few miles around the cave. Every time he settled down, he had to understand the surrounding neighbors. This was a habit he had developed over the past 6 months. It was this habit that had saved him many times. There were a few times when he had almost become neighbors with a dangerous blood fiend. Fortunately, he discovered that the blood fiends had escaped during the night when he was investigating. There are many footprints, and they belong to different blood fiends. At the entrance of a valley, Gray found many footprints of different blood fiends. He was surprised to find that these footprints belonged to different blood fiends. It seemed that many blood fiends had gathered here. Why are there so many blood fiends gathered in this valley? Could it be that there is some kind of precious magic herb in this valley? Gray could not help but think of the precious magic herb. Only such things could attract different types of blood fiends. Curious, Gray quietly explored the valley. The vegetation in the valley was very sparse. There were many places where bare rocks could be seen. Some vines climbed up the cliffs, and occasionally a few fruits could be seen hanging from them. The fruits were not poisonous. Gray had picked them and eaten them before. With his poison ability, he could check if the fruits were poisonous. Therefore, he was not worried that he would be poisoned. He continued forward for about 100 meters. Whoosh! Suddenly, a blood fiend jumped out from a cave that was half the height of a human hanging on the cliff. Its eyes were green, and it opened its mouth to bite him. It was a giant python. Boom! Marina, who had been guarding Gray's side, rushed out. Wearing gloves on his hands, he threw a punch at the giant serpent and hit its head. Magic light level energy, and not just any magic light level energy, exploded on the giant python's head. The giant python's head exploded on the spot, and all kinds of tissues splattered everywhere. A lump of meat fell not far from Gray. The lump of meat was torn from some tissue, and there were several tentacles on its surface. Seeing this lump of meat, Gray could not help but squint his eyes. He was very familiar with this thing because it was the core of the corpse controlling ability. It was a lump of meat that could control corpses. The reason so many blood fiends are gathered here is because there is a blood fiend with the ability to control corpses. The answer was very obvious. The reason for so many blood fiends gathering was not because of some precious magic herb, but because there was a blood fiend with the ability to control corpses. The other blood fiends were all corpses that were controlled by this blood fiend with the ability to control corpses. I don't know what level this blood fiend is, but it shouldn't be a low-level one. Gray was slightly excited. When he was on the plane, he had sent people to look for a king-level blood fiend with the ability to control corpses. He had even issued a mercenary mission to Mercenary City, but unfortunately, he had not been able to find one. He did not expect to encounter a blood fiend with the ability to control corpses in this place. Moreover, its level was very likely not low. He noticed that the footprints of the blood fiends from before were all on the large side. It was obvious that the blood fiends were not small in size and were not weak. To be able to control the corpses of these large blood fiends, this blood fiend with the ability to control corpses was certainly not weak. Bang, bang, bang. Following the violent movements, a large number of blood fiends appeared in front of Gray. The death of the giant python had probably alerted the blood fiend with the ability to control corpses, so it was controlling the blood fiends to attack. There were many blood fiends attacking. There were king-level blood fiends, magic light-level blood fiends, and some blood fiends below the king level. There were more than 20 of them. Although the ability to control corpses could only control 20 blood fiends of the same level, if the blood fiend was of a lower level, the number of blood fiends that could be controlled would be multiplied several times. There are 5 blood fiends with the size of magic light level. It seems that the blood fiend with the ability to control corpses is at least a magic light level blood fiend. Gray was not shocked when he saw the blood fiends pouncing toward him. Instead, he was elated. He had been searching for a blood fiend with a higher level of the ability to control corpses for many years, but he did not expect to encounter one by chance. It had to be said that sometimes things were just that mysterious. No matter how hard one tried, they could not be found, but when one did not deliberately look for them, they would inadvertently appear. Chapter 628. Whoosh! Beside Gray, Marna rushed out to meet the oncoming blood fiends. Boom! A king-level blood fiend at the front was smashed into meat paste by his fist. Blood, flesh, and bone fragments splattered everywhere. However, he didn't slow down at all. His other fist smashed into a magic light-level blood beast that was charging at him, sending the gigantic blood beast, which weighed dozens of tons, flying backward. Bang, bang, bang. One by one, the blood fiends were either smashed into pieces or injured. He was like a ferocious tiger that had entered a flock of sheep, ferocious and unstoppable. Gray didn't even use his alloying ability. With the 5th level magic light defense, normal magic light attacks wouldn't be able to hurt it. Whoosh! A blood fiend pounced on Gray, opening its malevolent and stinking mouth. A pair of greenish-black wings sprouted from Gray's back. He flew into the sky and looked down at the battle on the ground. He had no intention of joining the battle. Although there were many blood fiends, Maruna's strength was enough to deal with them. It was only a matter of time before he destroyed them. He didn't even need to do anything. Sure enough, the number of blood fiends controlling corpses was rapidly decreasing. The blood fiends that were king rank and below couldn't even withstand a single punch from Maruna. They were all turned into meat paste and bone fragments. Only 5 magic light rank blood fiends controlling corpses were still able to move. Attack the head. Flying in the air, Gray gave instructions to Maruna. Immediately, he saw that Maruna's attacks were no longer aimed at the blood fiends' bodies, but at their heads. Crack! After being punched continuously in the head by Maruna, a gigantic beast with a greenish-black body that looked like a green rock finally couldn't withstand the enormous force. With a crack, its skull shattered and brain matter flowed out as it fell to the ground. Crack! Crack! After this gigantic beast, the 2nd and 3rd magic light level blood fiends soon fell. Only 2 blood fiends were left standing. Dong, dong, dong. Loud footsteps approached again. Gray tilted his head and saw a group of blood fiends approaching from a corner. Every one of them was not small in size. Among the blood beasts, there was a giant ape that was more than 10 meters tall. It had white fur all over its body, but it wasn't dense. Instead, it was sparse and looked like the white fur that grew out of a rotting corpse. However, this was not a corpse-controlled blood fiend. Gray could feel the body temperature of a corpse controlled by other blood fiends. This was a living blood fiend, and it was very likely a blood fiend with the ability to control corpses. The blood fiends with the ability to control corpses must have sensed that the number of corpses they could control was greatly reduced, so they rushed over with their remaining forces. There's a big guy behind us. Suddenly, Gray's expression changed slightly. There was a huge commotion coming from a corner where he could not see. Just by walking, there was a sound like an earthquake. He looked at the corner and had a bad premonition. A blood fiend that could cause such a huge commotion definitely wasn't small, and the fact that it wasn't small made him suspicious. Finally, he saw a corner of the gigantic beast. It was a huge head with no scales on its surface, but it had a black cuticle that was no weaker than scales. Its huge eyes were like millstones. Its mouth was flat, and its sharp teeth were crisscrossed. Each tooth was more than a meter long. Behind the head was a pair of huge black claws covered in a black cuticle. The sharp claws at the end were black and shiny. They were slightly curved and looked like battle swords. Then, there was the beast's torso. Its huge torso was 7 to 8 meters wide. There were several rows of long spikes on its back, and each spike was extremely thick. The thickest part was at least half a meter thick. Next, there were 2 hind legs and an extremely thick and long tail. The tail was also full of spikes, and it was denser. If the tail hit its prey, it would definitely leave bloody holes all over its body. Finally, the gigantic beast's full appearance appeared in front of Gray. Gray had a rough estimate of its length. "It's more than 40 meters. Gray gasped slightly. The gigantic beast's body was more than 40 meters long, far exceeding the average magic light level blood fiend. It was very likely that this was not a magic light level blood fiend, but a disaster level blood fiend. This blood fiend with the ability to control corpses should only be a magic light level blood fiend. How could it have the ability to kill a disaster level blood fiend? Gray was very uncertain about this conjecture because it did not make sense. Even if it could control 20 magic light level blood fiends of the same level, it would not be a match for a disaster level blood fiend. This magic light level blood fiend with the ability to control corpses should not have the ability to kill a disaster level blood fiend. There was a gap of 5 levels between a disaster level blood fiend and a magic light level blood fiend. Such a huge gap could not be made up by 20 blood fiends. This was also the reason why Gray was not sure if the gigantic beast in front of him was a disaster level blood fiend. Boom! The remaining 2 magic light level blood fiends had been killed by Marina. Marina pounced on the group of blood fiends that had rushed over to help. Bang! A magic light level blood fiend was sent flying with a punch. He then pounced on the 10-meter-long gigantic ape. This was Gray's command. As long as the gigantic ape with the ability to control corpses was killed, the blood fiends would naturally stop moving. Therefore, he ordered Marina to attack the gigantic ape. Suddenly, the gigantic beast, which was more than 40 meters long, blocked the gigantic ape at an unimaginable speed. It was like a giant claw of a large excavator slapping toward Marina. It was pure physical strength, but the movement it caused was extremely terrifying. The wind was strong, and sand and stones were flying. Alloy form. Gray looked serious. He was sure that this was a disaster-level blood fiend with just this attack. However, he could not figure out how a magic light level blood fiend with the ability to control corpses could kill a disaster-level blood fiend. He immediately used the ability of alloy form on Marina. Suddenly, the surface of Marina's body was covered with a layer of silver-gray color. Bang! Without Gray's ability of time to speed up, Marina could not dodge the giant claw. It was immediately slapped into the hard rock ground by the giant claw. Its entire body was embedded in the rock. Bang! The giant claw lifted. At this moment, Marina, who was embedded in the rock, suddenly jumped up and punched the disaster-level blood fiend. His defense was not weak, and with the addition of alloy form, his defense had reached an extremely terrifying level. Therefore, he was not injured by the attack of the disaster-level blood fiend. Bang! However, before Marina's fist could hit the disaster-level blood fiend, the disaster-level blood fiend lifted its claw again and slapped Marina's body with agility that was not commensurate with its body size. Marina's body crashed into the rock wall of the valley and was deeply embedded in it. The rocks in the valley trembled and fell. Marina rushed out again and rushed toward the disaster-level blood fiend. However, the disaster-level blood fiend greeted him with its claw again. Puff! One of the mountain peaks that formed the valley was penetrated by this claw, and Marina was sent flying out of the valley. After sending Gray flying, the giant blood fiend's huge eyes looked at Gray, who was flying in the air. Then it raised its head and stomped on the ground with its 2 hind legs. Its huge body jumped up and pounced toward Gray. Gray was shocked and quickly increased the distance between them to avoid the bite. Looking at the giant blood fiend with lingering fear, Gray sent a command to Marina outside the valley to meet up with him. After that, He quickly left the valley with Marna. With this disaster-level blood fiend around, it would be difficult to kill the giant ape with the ability to control corpses. On a mountain peak 2 to 3 miles away from the valley, Gray looked in the direction of the valley, monitoring the giant ape with the ability to control corpses in the valley. If it has the ability of time, it should be able to destroy it. While monitoring the giant ape with the ability to control corpses, Gray was also thinking of a way to kill this giant ape with the ability to control corpses. In order to kill the giant ape with the ability to control corpses, he first had to deal with the disaster-level blood fiend. With the blood fiend's protection, it would be difficult to kill the giant ape with the ability to control corpses. Therefore, in order to kill the giant ape with the ability to control corpses, he first had to deal with the disaster-level blood fiend. According to Gray's estimation, the ability of time should be able to destroy this disaster-level blood fiend. After all, the ability of time could change time and ignore the physical defense of the body. However, it would be a pity to destroy the corpse of a disaster-level blood fiend just like that. Gray had already seen how powerful the corpse of a disaster-level blood fiend was. For someone like him who had the ability to control corpses, such a blood fiend's corpse was even more precious than a powerful magic weapon. If a powerful magic weapon did not have enough blood energy to support it, it would not be able to unleash its full power. However, the corpse of a powerful blood fiend was different. After he gained control of it, he could immediately unleash a powerful force without many restrictions. It would be a pity to destroy such a corpse. It seems like I still have to use the ghost ability, Gray muttered to himself as he looked at the sky that was about to turn dark. The ghost ability was the nemesis of the ability to control corpses. This was because the target of the ability to control corpses only had physical strength and did not have the power of fire or lightning. In the face of a ghost attack, there was no effective way to counterattack. To a certain extent, the ghost ability was a very incomprehensible power. Of course, this kind of power was not without its nemesis. Powers such as fire and lightning were the nemesis of this kind of power. In the face of such powers, the ghost had almost no resistance. The mutual restraint between abilities is really amazing. The ghost ability was the nemesis of the ability to control corpses, and powers such as fire and lightning were the nemesis of the ghost ability. If the ability to control corpses was unleashed to the limit, it could cross several levels and fight against blood fiends with lightning or fire abilities. The mutual restraint between the two abilities made Gray sigh in amazement. Chapter 6:29. Night had fallen, and a moon hung in the sky. It was the same purple moon as it was in this plain, but it was definitely not the same one. Gray had gone to the edge of the plain to investigate the plain barrier, but he had never seen the moon or the sun descend from the sky. He suspected that the moon and the sun were not real, but merely products of a certain law. They would appear at certain times and disappear at certain times. Under the moonlight, Gray and Marna quietly rushed to the valley. Following them was a spirit emitting a hazy white light. After the previous battle, most of the blood fiends controlled by the giant ape had been destroyed. They easily entered the valley and went deep into the valley. It was not until they were about to enter the heart of the valley that they encountered a blood fiend-controlled corpse. It was a giant beast that was more than 20 meters long and covered in black spikes. Next to Gray, the ghost floated out and faced the black spiked beast. The black spiked beast used the spikes on its body to hit the ghost, but the ghost pierced through and drilled into its body. Clang! After the spirit entered its body, the black spiked beast's body seemed to be poisoned. It suddenly died and fell straight to the ground. The black meatball was the core that controlled the black spiked beast. This was the weakest part of the black spiked beast's body. When the spirit used its soul to freeze and destroy the black meatball, the black spiked beast would naturally lose its ability to move. Thump! 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 The death of the black spiked beast immediately alerted the giant ape. Under the protection of a group of blood fiends, the giant ape rushed over. The disaster-level giant beast followed behind it to ensure its safety. Gray and Marna stood where they were. The spirit that came out of the black spiked beast's body floated towards them. Swoosh! A slender behemoth with sharp claws pounced at the spirit, but it missed. The spirit penetrated its claws and drilled into its body. Clang! Just like the black spiked beast, this giant beast with sharp claws also collapsed as if it had been poisoned. The spirit came out and attacked the giant ape that had the ability to control corpses. Boom! A giant claw the size of a room slammed toward Spectre. A strong wind howled, and the gravel on the ground was sent flying into the air by the fierce wind pressure. This was a ferocious strike, one that Demon Shine would find absolutely difficult to resist. But even so, this strike was still useless against Spectre. The ghost was not injured at all. Instead, it took the opportunity to drill into the front limb of the disaster-level beast and crawl along its front limb toward its head. Rumble! The disaster-level behemoth, which was over 40 meters long, fell like a mountain. The huge impact raised a cloud of dust on the ground. Previously, Marna had been like a disaster-level behemoth swatting a fly when he swatted the 5th level of magic light. He had been easily subdued by the ghost. This was the wonder of the mutual restraint between abilities. GG. The disaster-level beast that he had been relying on had lost control. The giant ape transformation panicked and ordered the other blood fiends to attack the spirit, while he quickly retreated. The enemy in front of it was no longer something it could deal with. It wanted to climb up the cliff and escape. Whoosh! Marna, who was standing beside Gray, rushed out. With the speed of the 5th level of magic light, he avoided the blood fiends that were blocking his way and quickly caught up with the giant ape transformation. He stood in front of the giant ape transformation and threw a punch at it. Crack! The sound of bones breaking could be heard. The giant ape transformation was sent flying backward. Its chest was lacerated and there were obvious signs of collapse. The injury was not light. Bang! The giant ape transformation wanted to get up and escape, but a foot suddenly stomped on its wound. The broken bone was pushed inwards by the foot. A sharp bone immediately pierced through the giant ape transformation's heart. The giant ape transformation's heart was like a punctured balloon, and blood flowed out. With its heart pierced, the giant ape transformation was bound to die. The giant ape transformation went into a frenzy. Its body struggled madly, but Maruna's foot was on its body. No matter how hard it struggled, it could not break free. In terms of strength, Marna, who was at the 5th level of magic light, was much stronger than the giant ape transformation. After a short while, the giant ape transformation died. Gray stepped forward to collect the blood. After collecting all the blood, he walked towards the disaster-level beast and sized it up. The 40-meter-long beast gave Gray a strong visual impact. Although it was not the first time he had seen a disaster-level beast, it was the first time he had seen one up close. There are no wounds. Gray took out his portable rune lamp and shone it on the disaster-level beast. He circled the beast and was surprised to find that there were no wounds on its body. How did this disaster-level beast get killed? Gray was even more confused. He followed the tail of the disaster-level beast and climbed onto its back. He wanted to find the cause of its death. Soon he found something. The disaster-level beast did not have any scales on its body. Instead, it was covered with a thick layer of black cuticle. This layer of cuticle was no weaker than the scales. Standing on the back of the disaster-level beast, he found that not all of the cuticle was black. Some parts of the cuticle were mottled with white. These white spots were scattered all over the disaster-level beast's back, and even its head and limbs. They looked like age spots on the face of an elderly person. This should be the cause of the disaster-level beast's death. This disaster-level beast was not killed by the giant ape transformation. It had died of old age. The giant ape transformation was really lucky. It had encountered a disaster-level beast that had died of old age and was able to control it before it was eaten by the other blood fiends. Of course, his luck was also very good. Not only did he encounter the giant ape transformation, but he also encountered a disaster-level beast that could control corpses. Now, both of them belonged to him. With a body that was more than 40 meters long, even with the space of the purple ring, it was a little difficult to fit it. After putting all the items in the purple ring into the rune portal bag, Gray was finally able to put the disaster-level beast body into it. He did not plan to switch from controlling Maruna to controlling the disaster-level behemoth. In this dangerous forest where even the disaster-level behemoths were not at the top of the food chain, keeping a low profile was the key to survival. Compared to the huge body of the disaster-level behemoth, Maruna, who was extremely small, would be of more help to him. As for the bodies of the disaster-level beasts, they could be replaced when they needed a stronger combat power. Although the disaster-level beasts only possessed the strength of their bodies, they could still fight the disaster-level blood beasts head-on after being strengthened by the alloy. After setting up a tent in the valley, with Maruna guarding the perimeter, Gray quickly ate some food. Then he took out a bathtub, filled it with hot water, and sat in it. Now that he had reached the third stage of the king level, he could consume the blood of another type of blood fiend to evolve. Although he had accumulated a lot of blood from magic light level blood fiends, including 2 types of mixed blood from magic light level blood fiends, Gray did not consume any of them. He was already at the third stage of the king level, and his combat power was already very strong among the magic light level blood fiends. Consuming the blood of a magic light level blood fiend was not worth it. The blood of a disaster level blood fiend was more suitable for him. Although he did not have any blood fiends at the moment, as long as he left the forest and entered human territory, he would definitely find a way to obtain them. Therefore, he did not consume the blood of a magic light level blood fiend. However, the giant ape transformation with the ability to control corpses was an exception. Although it only had a magic light level blood fiend's bloodline, once it was developed to the limit, its combat power would be extremely terrifying. Therefore, the blood of a magic light level blood fiend was an exception. Gulp! Gray poured out a portion of the giant ape transformation's blood and drank it in one gulp. The next moment, pain spread throughout Gray's body. Wave after wave of pain attacked Gray's nerves. It was as if every part of his body was being pricked by needles. Gray had experienced this many times before. Sitting in the bathtub, he gritted his teeth and endured. This was the price he had to pay for gaining power. If this benefit fell into someone else's hands, they would probably be willing to endure even if it was several times more painful. After a long time, Gray's body was covered in sweat. The pain had subsided. He had officially obtained a magic light level blood fiend with the ability to control corpses. Although he could only use the power of a king level blood fiend, as long as he had a suitable corpse, his combat power would be greatly increased. He chose 3 magic light level blood fiends from the well-preserved blood fiends to control. Although they did not increase his combat power by much, they did increase his alertness. With Maruna and the 3 magic light level blood fiends guarding him, he was undoubtedly safer at night. Thump, thump, thump. A few days later, Gray, who was hurrying forward, suddenly heard a violent commotion coming from his left. He leaped to a high vantage point and looked into the distance. Instantly, he saw a large number of trees on his left side collapse. A huge creature was advancing. It was a giant beast with a body length of about 30 meters. It walked on all 4s and was covered in thick hair. The hair was black and white in color, forming circular patterns on the body of the giant beast. On its head were 3 sharp white horns that were several meters long. 2 of the horns were slanted to the sides, while the one in the middle was pointed forward. Its tail was very short, with only a short section. It was furry and covered in white fur. This should be a disaster-level blood fiend, Gray judged as he looked at the blood fiend from afar. Generally speaking, even the largest magic light level blood fiends were only about 20 meters long. Blood fiends that were over 30 meters long could be disaster level or even higher. This was the conclusion that Gray had drawn from his experience in this dangerous forest. Let's use this disaster-level blood fiend to test the combat power of the disaster-level blood fiend zombie. Seeing this disaster-level blood fiend, Gray's heart skipped a beat. He had long wanted to see how powerful the disaster-level blood fiend zombie could be when combined with his metal elemental ability. He wanted to see if it could be as powerful as a disaster-level blood fiend zombie as he imagined. Now, this disaster-level blood fiend zombie was the best test subject. After retreating a little and finding a flat area, Gray released the disaster-level Blood Fiend zombie and used his zombie control ability on it. A few minutes later, the disaster-level Blood Fiend zombie stood up. With a body length of more than 40 meters, it stood in front of Gray with a terrifying aura. Using his metal elemental ability, the zombie's originally black body suddenly turned silver gray. He looked at the disaster-level Blood Fiend zombie with satisfaction and ordered it to attack the disaster-level Blood Fiend zombie. Immediately, with a violent rumble, the disaster-level Blood Fiend zombie rushed toward the disaster-level Blood Fiend zombie. Chapter 630. The disaster-grade Blood Fiends were the source of disasters. Their appearance usually represented a disaster. They had a terrifying body size and were powerful enough to bring about destruction. This was also the reason why blood warriors of the same level as them were known as warriors of destruction. The brief confrontation with the Calamity-grade Blood Fiend half a year ago was still vivid in Gray's mind. That kind of terrifying destructive power had shocked him. In an instant, the landscape of a large area had changed. The Blood Fiend was simply the incarnation of destruction. If Maruna's speed had not been accelerated by the Time Rule ability, he might have been left there. Now, he was going to challenge the giant Blood Fiend that was known as the source of disasters. He could not help but feel a little excited. He had only been in the Origin world for half a year, and he was already qualified to compete with a Blood Fiend of this level. Although luck played a part in his success, it was also a reflection of his ability. If he did not have the ability to control spirits, he would not have been able to kill the giant ape that was protected by the disaster-grade Blood Fiend and obtain it. Thump! 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 The huge commotion from the side immediately alarmed the disaster-grade Blood Fiend with black and white fur. It stopped in its tracks and turned towards the direction of the commotion. Based on its experience, a Blood Fiend that could cause such a huge commotion was definitely not a simple Blood Fiend. Crack! Crack! As the trees fell, it saw the Blood Fiend approaching it. It was a giant silver-gray beast that was much larger than it. The Blood Fiend became even more fearful. Roar! It let out a warning roar, warning the Blood Fiend to not come any closer. However, the silver-gray beast ignored its warning and continued to approach it. It was completely enraged. The one in the middle of its 3 horns turned from white to gold. Then, a thick bolt of golden lightning shot towards the silver-white giant beast. Boom! The golden lightning was so fast that it struck the disaster-level Blood Fiend in the blink of an eye. The disaster-level Blood Fiend was enveloped by the golden lightning. However, the disaster-grade Blood Fiend originally had a disaster-grade defense. In addition to the increase in its defense due to its alloy form, the disaster-grade Blood Fiend's current defense was extremely terrifying. Although the golden lightning bolt had enveloped the disaster-grade Blood Fiend, it did not leave any wounds. Pung, pung, pung. Bolts of lightning struck the disaster-level Blood Fiend one after another, but none of them were able to hurt it. In fact, the disaster-level Blood Fiend didn't seem to be able to move at all. The disaster-level Blood Fiend continued to charge at the disaster-level Blood Fiend with black and white fur. Puff! The huge claw, which was as big as a room, slammed down on the body of the disaster-level Blood Fiend, leaving several scratches on its body. Blood flowed out from the scratches. Roar! Feeling the pain, the disaster-level Blood Fiend with black and white fur turned its head angrily and stabbed the disaster-level Blood Fiend with its sharp horn. Clang! The razor-sharp horn hit the disaster-level Blood Fiend, but only a metallic sound was heard. It was still unable to hurt the disaster-level Blood Fiend. Bang! Taking advantage of this opportunity, the disaster-level Blood Fiend whipped its huge tail and sent the disaster-level Blood Fiend flying away, blood gushing out of its body. Many trees were snapped by its huge body as if they were fragile weeds. Thump, thump, thump. With heavy footsteps, the disaster-level Blood Fiend pounced on the disaster-level Blood Fiend with black and white fur. The disaster-level Blood Fiend with black and white fur got up and stared at the disaster-level Blood Fiend with its huge eyes. Whoosh! In front of the disaster-level Blood Fiend with black and white fur, a huge ball of liquid appeared. However, what was strange was that the ball of liquid had golden lightning flashing inside it. It maintained the shape of a ball and hit the disaster-level blood fiend. Boom! With a violent explosion, the ball of liquid exploded with a terrifying destructive power. Under this destructive power, the disaster-level blood fiend was forced to retreat. This was the first time the disaster-level blood fiend was forced to retreat since the start of the battle. Hybrid ability. This disaster-level blood fiend has mastered a hybrid ability. Gray, who was watching from afar, was shocked. The disaster-level blood fiend with black and white fur used the lightning ability in the beginning. However, the ability it was using now was obviously not as simple as that. Its appearance was like a ball of liquid, and inside the ball of liquid, there was golden lightning. It should be a hybrid ability of water and lightning. If he had to define it, it should be called a water thunder. If it was an ordinary disaster-level blood fiend, it should have a chance of winning. However, against a disaster-level blood fiend with a hybrid ability, it should be very difficult to win. However, it should not lose. Gray raises eyebrows. He had originally chosen a random target, but he did not expect this disaster-level blood fiend to be so powerful and powerful. Of course, with the strong defense of its alloy form, the disaster-level blood fiend would definitely not lose. Its strong defense had already made it invincible, unless it encountered a type of blood fiend that could ignore its defense. However, this disaster-level blood fiend with black and white fur did not have the ability to ignore its defense. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The battle that followed was just as Gray had expected. Every time the disaster-level blood fiend approached the disaster-level blood fiend with black and white fur, the water thunder would hit the disaster-level blood fiend. The disaster-level blood fiend was immediately pushed back by the powerful impact of the water thunder explosion, and it was forced to stay away from the disaster-level blood fiend with black and white fur. The disaster-level blood fiend with black and white fur could not do anything to the disaster-level blood fiend. Even if its strongest attack landed on the disaster-level blood fiend, it could not do any damage at all. All it could do was push the disaster-level blood fiend back. Roar! The battle lasted for more than half an hour. Accompanied by an unwilling roar, the disaster-level blood fiend with black and white fur turned around and quickly left. Faced with a battle that could not be decided, it finally chose to retreat. The fact that it chose to retreat after fighting for more than half an hour was enough to show how unwilling it was. As a disaster-level blood fiend with a hybrid ability, other blood fiends would basically be defeated by it. It was very rare for it to be defeated. Without letting the disaster-level blood fiend chase after it, Gray walked to the messy ground after the battle. He looked at the ground with anticipation in his eyes. Soon, a pool of blood-red liquid on a green rock attracted Gray's attention. Gray quickly walked forward and took out a rune bag to collect the blood. Since the disaster-level blood fiend had a hybrid ability, the blood of such a blood fiend was obviously qualified for him to consume and transform. Of course, he was not interested in the hybrid ability of water and thunder. Instead, he was interested in the water and thunder elemental abilities it had. The time elemental ability was a combination of wind, ice, fire, poison, and wood elemental abilities. There were a total of 10 elemental abilities, so he could not help but think of combining the other 5. If he combined the remaining 5 elemental abilities, what kind of ability would it form? Would it become another type of rule ability? As for the other 5 elemental abilities, they were metal, lightning, water, earth, and shadow. Among them, Surefoam already possessed 4 elemental abilities aside from water. However, among these 4 elemental abilities, only the earth elemental bloodline was at the magic light rank. The other elemental bloodlines were too weak and had long since been developed to their limits. The blood of a disaster-level blood fiend with both thunder and water elemental abilities was just right to supplement the water elemental bloodline and upgrade the thunder elemental bloodline. He needed both bloodlines, so he was looking for the blood of a disaster-level blood fiend with black and white fur. In the dense forest, dozens of people were shuttling through the forest. They were all wearing green combat suits, which perfectly blended in with the surrounding environment. They were smeared with a magic potion that could isolate smell, which could prevent them from being discovered by the blood fiends with a strong sense of smell. It also had the effect of repelling mosquitoes. They walked through the forest full of fallen leaves, but they rarely made any sound. If one were to observe carefully, one would notice that every time their feet landed, they would make a sweeping movement. It was this movement that pushed away the dried leaves that would cause a sound when stepped on, thus preventing them from making any noise. This was a group of people who were very experienced in the forest. At noon, the dozens of people stopped to rest. They did not light a fire. Instead, they took out dry food and water and sat on a tree to eat. "Father, how much longer until we arrive?" A woman whispered to a middle-aged man beside her. The woman had an excellent figure. Although she was wearing a combat suit, her voluptuous figure could not be hidden. On the contrary, it made her even more alluring. A few of the young men in the group would subconsciously look at her, then lower their heads in embarrassment. The woman's face did not disappoint. She was definitely not a killer from the back. Although she was not as perfect as the Saint of Light, she was definitely beautiful. "Soon, we will arrive in 1 or 2 hours." The person who replied was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. He looked very ordinary, but the occasional flash of light in his eyes made him look a little special. It was hard to imagine that this middle-aged man was the father of the beautiful woman in front of him, but that was the truth. He was the father of this beautiful woman, at least in name. When will that astral fruit ripen? Judging from the time, it should be in the next few days. They came from a family that made a living by harvesting magic herbs for generations. More than a year ago, the middle-aged man found an almost ripe astral fruit. This was a type of medicinal herb that could increase one's strength and promote the evolution of one's bloodline. He set up a runic array to hide it, and now he was going to harvest it. On a tree not far away from these dozens of people, Gray watched them from afar. He had been following them for a few hours. This was the first time he had encountered people in more than half a year. He wanted to secretly follow them and use their familiarity with the forest to leave the forest. After wandering in the forest for more than half a year, he was already tired of living in the forest. Chapter 631. After a short rest, the group set off again. Gray continued to follow them. After an hour, Gray saw the group arrive near a stone hill that was dozens of meters tall. It seemed that this stone hill was their target. Unexpectedly, the group didn't climb up the stone hill. Instead, they followed the middle-aged man and crashed into the stone hill after he took out a metal plate. An unexpected scene occurred. It was as if all of them had earth abilities. The group actually penetrated the stone hill and entered the interior. A runic array disguised as a stone hill. Gray looked at this scene with interest. If the runic standards of the Empire were one level higher than that of the Four Kingdoms, then the runic standards of the Origin World were one level higher than that of the Empire. Gray chose a secluded place outside to wait for the group. For 4 days, the group didn't come out of the runic array. Because he was too far away, he couldn't hear the group's conversation. However, for a runic array to be set up in the forest, this place must have some kind of secret. He thought of capturing the group and forcing them to reveal the secret. He was confident that with his current strength, the runic array outside wouldn't be able to stop him. In the end, he gave up. These people had no enmity with him, so he couldn't kill them and rob them. This was a matter of principle. Although he wasn't a good person, he absolutely couldn't be without a bottom line. Another day passed. Just as Gray was getting impatient from waiting, a change occurred. Gray discovered that some blood fiends were gathering in the forest. Finally, they came near the stone hill and tried to attack it. However, they were blocked by the runic array's defensive barrier. Looks like it's some kind of magic herb, and it's about to mature. Seeing this, Gray immediately deduced that these blood fiends must have been attracted by some kind of smell, and the only thing that could attract blood fiends in this dense forest was some kind of precious mana herb. This kind of magic herb should be on the verge of maturity. It emitted a smell that only blood fiends could smell, attracting these blood fiends. Since the magic herbs are about to mature, then it's almost time for them to leave the forest. Gray waited patiently. The group of people was not far away from leaving the forest. When the time came, All he had to do was follow them, and he would be able to leave the forest and enter the human city. Over the next 2 days, more and more blood fiends were attracted. Dozens of blood fiends had already been attracted. Among them, Gray saw two 10-meter-tall blood fiends. They should be king-level blood fiends. At noon, a rich fragrance filled the air. Even Gray smelled it. He knew that this magic herb should have matured. Father, many blood fiends have already gathered outside. Among them, there are even two king-level blood fiends. When magic herbs are fully matured, they will definitely launch a fierce attack. Will the formation patterns be able to withstand them? Kinza looked worriedly at her father. Don't worry, it's just two ordinary king-level blood fiends. With their strength, they won't be able to break the formation. The middle-aged man, Edmund, shook his head. He had spent a lot of money to purchase this rune array disc from a rune master. Ordinary king-level blood fiends would not be able to break it. Master, miss, the star fruit has matured. At this moment, a young man's voice sounded excitedly. The surface of a black fruit suddenly blossomed with starry light. It looked like the stars in the night sky. This was the reason why this fruit was called the star fruit. Rumble, rumble. At this moment, there was a loud noise. The blood fiends outside the formation patterns were attracted by the scent of the star fruit. They went berserk and began to attack the defensive barrier. Among the two king-level blood fiends, one spat out a huge chunk of ice, while the other spat out sharp water blades. The defensive barrier immediately began to tremble. Kinza, prepare the wooden box made of jade wood. Once the star fruit's glow fades, immediately harvest it. Otherwise, the medicinal effect will be lost. Although the formation patterns were being attacked by many blood fiends, Edmund displayed an unparalleled calmness. He calmly gave the order. His calmness also affected the others, and the tension in their hearts eased a little. A few middle-aged men were thinking about where they should go after this trip, and a few young men's eyes involuntarily drifted to Ken Shah, and the tension in their hearts lessened. Rumble. Suddenly, there was a loud noise louder than the one before. The defensive barrier began to tremble violently. Even the outermost layer of rock camouflage disappeared under this attack. Not good. The middle-aged man's expression did not change, but his heart became heavy. He looked at a blood fiend that was exactly 10 meters long and covered in gray fur. This was a king-level blood fiend that had just appeared after being attracted by the scent. It was this king-level blood fiend that had used a black liquid to cause the defensive barrier to tremble violently. He recognized this type of blood fiend. It was a king-level blood fiend that had mastered both water and metal elemental abilities. It had the heavy water ability, which was a combination of water and metal elemental abilities. Just a small ball of water produced by this ability weighed more than 1,000 kilograms. It looked weak, but it had a terrifying impact. He was not sure if the defensive barrier could withstand it. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Sounds of impact rang out one after another. The defensive barrier began to tremble violently. Every hit seemed to be hitting the dozens of people's chests. They could not help but worry that the barrier would shatter in the next moment. Gotcha! With a crisp sound, cracks appeared on the surface of the defensive barrier. Everyone who saw this scene turned pale. The appearance of cracks meant that the defensive barrier had exceeded its limit. In other words, the defensive barrier was on the verge of collapse. At this moment, it was too late to give up on the galactic fruit. After all, the crazy blood fiends would definitely not care if you gave up on the galactic fruit. As long as you blocked their path, you would definitely be attacked. Patter. With a crisp sound, the defensive barrier shattered like glass. The blood fiends that were surrounding the barrier immediately rushed in and attacked the people who were blocking their path. A young man's battle blade was wrapped around the blood fiend's ability. He slashed at the blood fiend that was attacking him, but his neck was bitten by the blood fiend. Blood flowed out, and it seemed that he would not survive. No! A middle-aged man slashed at the claws of a blood fiend that was pouncing at him. He blocked this blood fiend, but another blood fiend pounced at him from the side and pounced on him. Bang! A young man was sent flying by a king-level blood fiend. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. No one knew if he was dead or alive. More and more people were killed. In a short period of time, the team of dozens of people had been greatly reduced. The middle-aged man, Edmund, was anxious. However, he was currently entangled by a king-level blood fiend and could not escape. He had already given the order to give up on the galactic fruit, but even so, it was too late. With a king-level blood fiend, their team was not weak. However, it was a pity that they were facing a pack of stronger blood fiends. There were 3 king-level blood fiends, and one of them even had a mixed ability. They were being slaughtered one-sidedly. The target of their trip was also swallowed by a king-level blood fiend that could control heavy water. No one dared to stop it, not even the middle-aged man, Edmund. It seems that they are in trouble. Looking at the massacre from afar, Gray pondered for a moment. In the end, he still flew over. Judging from the situation, these people would definitely not be able to stop the blood fiends from slaughtering them. In the end, they would all die here. This was not what he wanted to see. He still wanted this group of people to lead the way. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Activating his plant ability, a large number of plants grew wildly and attacked the blood fiends. Poof, poof. More than a dozen blood fiends were entangled by the madly growing vines. Like a cocoon, the vines grew tighter and tighter. In the end, the blood fiends were squeezed into a pile of meat paste. Gray was only using his wood ability. However, now that he had reached the 3rd stage of the king level, even though he was only using his wood ability, he was able to crush the blood fiends that were not even king level. Poof, poof. In just 3 attacks, all the blood fiends below the king level had been crushed in a meat paste by Gray's plant ability. Then, he attacked the 3 king-level blood fiends with his plant ability. Green vines covered the sky and covered the earth like a green carpet, sweeping towards the 3 king-level blood fiends. The 3 king-level blood fiends immediately spat out their blood fiends' energy to attack the vines. Under the attack of the 3 king-level blood fiends, the vines were destroyed. However, more vines grew out and attacked the 3 king-level blood fiends. Patter. In the face of the endless green vines, 2 of the king-level blood fiends were finally unable to resist. They were wrapped up by the vines and turned into 2 green cocoons. Only the king-level blood fiend, which possessed a hybrid ability, was able to block the green vines and dodge them. It roared at Gray and fled without looking back. The enemy's strength was not something it could contend with. Now that it had swallowed the magic herbs and obtained the benefits, it naturally did not hesitate to escape. Gray had no intention of chasing after the blood fiends. He was only here to save people, not to torture and kill the blood fiends. The vines parted on their own, and he walked out from the mass of vines, appearing in front of the survivors. Chapter 632. We're not dead. We're not dead. We're saved. In the end, only a dozen or so people survived. Moreover, those who survived were all injured. They looked at each other with a look of relief on their faces. They originally thought that they were going to die, but they didn't expect that they would actually survive. They knew that they had been saved. The strongest among them, Master Edmund, was not a wood elementalist. Even if he was, it was impossible for him to be so strong. To be able to bind 2 king-level blood fiends without being able to break free, such strength was not as simple as a beginner king-level blood fiend. It was very likely that he was at the 2nd or 3rd tier of the king level, and Master Edmund was only at the 1st tier. Sir, thank you for your help. Otherwise, all of us would have died here today. The vines parted, and Gray appeared. Seeing Gray, the surviving people naturally understood that Gray had saved them. Edmund tidied up his slightly messy armor and bowed to Gray to thank him. No need. Gray shook his head slightly. Also, I have something I need your help with. Sir, what do you want us to do? There was some worry in the depths of Edmund's eyes. They had lost a lot of people, and the best choice was to leave the forest and go back to the city to rest. However, since Lin Huang had made a request, they had to do it. It was not only because Lin Huang had saved them, but also because they were no match for him. Actually, I'm lost. I want you to take me out of the forest. Seeing Edmund's nervousness, Gray could guess what he was thinking. He smiled and said, Sir, don't worry. We're very familiar with this area. I can't guarantee anything else, but I can definitely lead the way. Edmund breathed a sigh of relief. He had thought that Lin Huang's request would be very difficult. He did not expect it to be so simple. Behind him, Kinsa looked at Gray curiously. Her eyes were filled with curiosity as she tried to guess Gray's identity. Judging from his appearance and voice, he should be young. However, he was extremely powerful. Even her father found it difficult to deal with 3 king-level blood fiends, but Lin Huang had easily subdued them. He was probably from a big family or a big force. It'll be troublesome after that. Gray nodded. Originally, he wanted to follow behind this group of people and quietly follow them out of the forest. However, this group of people had an accident and almost got wiped out, forcing him to reveal himself. It was also good that he showed himself. He didn't need to spend the effort to secretly tail them. It saved him a lot of trouble and energy. If it wasn't for the fact that he rashly joined the other party's group in the middle of the forest, he would have chosen to show himself from the beginning. In fact, this was also the case. If he had asked to join at the beginning, the other party's team would have definitely rejected him. After all, the other party's goal this time was precious mana herbs. How could they possibly let an outsider join? After making some preparations, Gray and the team, which only had a dozen or so people left, set off for the forest. Along the way, Gray witnessed the dozen or so people's familiarity with the jungle. Following these people, they easily avoided powerful blood fiends one after another. There was not even a single battle. The only downside was that the atmosphere in the team was a little gloomy. The mana herbs had been stolen by the king-level blood fiends, and the team had lost more than half of its members. This caused the team to sink into sadness. Gray wasn't affected by this mood. He had no relationship with the people in this team, so naturally, he wouldn't feel sad. Moreover, in his opinion, since they had chosen to deal with the jungle, they should naturally be prepared to die at any time. If they weren't prepared to die, then they shouldn't have chosen to deal with the jungle in the first place. This was because dealing with the jungle was definitely one of the most dangerous occupations. Even someone as powerful as him could encounter danger at any time in the jungle, let alone a team with only king-level blood fiends. Sir Gray, apply this after bathing. It can eliminate the smell and also prevent mosquito bites. In the evening, the team set up camp in an open space in the forest. Gray was given an independent tent, and Kinsha gave him a potion called Scent Potion. This was a low-level magic potion, but it was extremely useful in the jungle. Following this team today, Gray saw the benefits of this magic potion. Not only could it prevent mosquito bites, but most importantly, as long as they didn't make any noise, even if they were very close, ordinary blood fiends wouldn't be able to detect them. Thank you. Gray thanked her and looked at the woman in front of him, Kinsha. She was a rather beautiful woman. Of course, the most attractive thing about her was her proud figure. Although she was wearing a green combat suit, her hot figure couldn't be hidden. Her buttocks were perky, her breasts were full, and her waist was round. It was very easy to arouse the most primitive urges. Along the way, the young people in the team would occasionally look at her. The reason Gray noticed her was because she seemed to be a little too enthusiastic about him. Then I won't disturb Sir Gray's rest. Kinsha nodded. Her eyelashes were very long, making her eyes look very charming. At such a young age, Gray's strength could be considered rare. She couldn't help but guess that he might be from a big family or a big power. This was also the reason why she was so enthusiastic about Gray. If the people in this world were divided into 2 types of people who were worth befriending and those who weren't, then she was undoubtedly someone worth befriending. After dinner, they extinguished the bonfire and rested. The team was extremely vigilant, and even at night, there were people taking turns to keep watch. Gray naturally wasn't assigned the duty of keeping watch, but he wasn't at ease about these people's vigilance. He quietly put Marna in the tent to keep watch before he went to sleep. The next morning, the team set off again, avoiding dangerous blood fiends as they approached the edge of the forest in a zigzagging manner. Hurrying on the road, resting, and repeating this process, half a month quickly passed. Sir Gray, we're about to leave the forest. Manwell City is in front. They had already met a few other teams and were clearly not far from the edge of the forest. Kinsha walked beside Gray and introduced Gray to him. She was obviously relieved when they were about to leave the forest. The dangers that were everywhere in the forest gave her a lot of pressure, especially after the disastrous losses on this trip. She was almost unable to return. Manuel City. Can you introduce Manuel City to me? More than half a year of living in the forest was about to come to an end. Gray couldn't help but let out a long sigh in his heart. But then, a question was placed in front of him. Where should he go from now on? He asked Kinshaw about Manuel City in order to determine if it was suitable to be a temporary place to stay. Manuel City is a city with a population of about 1 million. Because it's close to the forest, many families have been born in this city that rely on forest resources for their survival. For example, my Byland family is a family that has been harvesting medicinal herbs for generations. The reason why Manuel City is called Manuel City is because the family that built this city is called the Manuel family. The Manuel family? Gray looked at Kinsa, waiting for her to explain. Kinsa knew what Gray wanted to know, so she explained it to him. The Manuel family is considered a powerful family, even in the surrounding area. They have been in charge of Manuel City for more than 500 years. They have a very deep foundation, and there are magic light warriors in the family. Magic light warriors? Hearing this, Gray had already made a decision in his heart. Although Lin Ming was only at the 3rd level of the king level, with all of his abilities and methods added together, he wasn't any weaker than the Demon Light Warrior. The strongest family in this city only had the Demon Light Warrior as their leader. They obviously weren't a threat to Lin Ming. Thus, this city was very suitable as a temporary foothold. What plans do you have, Sir Gray? It's all thanks to Sir Gray that I was able to survive this time. If Sir Gray doesn't have any urgent matters to attend to, please come to the Byland family as a guest. Let me, a local, play host to you. Edmund approached Gray and said enthusiastically. Gray was a little hesitant. Originally, he had planned to find a hotel to stay in after entering the city and then learn more about this world from Su Su. Edmund's invitation moved him a little. If he could stay in this family, he should be able to integrate and understand this world faster. Of course, if he went to the Byland family as a guest, he would inevitably be implicated in this family's affairs. He would be viewed as an enemy by the family and be dragged into the whirlpool of the Byland family. Sir Gray, there's no need to rush. It won't be too late to rest in the Byland family for a few days before making plans. Kincha's eyes lit up, and she also invited him enthusiastically. After spending half a month together, she felt more and more that Gray was mysterious. Not only did he know some secrets, but he was also very clear about some things. However, when it came to some common sense, he was extremely lacking. This made her even more certain that he came from a large faction or a large family. Because he had lived in good conditions since he was young, he had servants to do everything for him. Therefore, he lacked common sense. The information that could be classified as secrets to her was only common information to the level of the Byland family. This was why he knew so many secrets. However, she did not know that these secrets were all forced out by Gray from the Magic Light Warrior of the Radiant Saint Hall. After all, he was a member of the Radiant Saint Hall, so he naturally knew a lot of common sense that ordinary people did not know. Then I'll have to bother you. Gray agreed in the end. Staying in the Byland family would indeed allow him to integrate and understand this world faster. Staying in the Byland family would allow him to slowly think about his plans. It was indeed a good choice. As for the opposing families and forces, they were nothing in his eyes. To be able to go against the Byland family and not destroy them, how strong could they be? To put it bluntly, he could crush them with a single hand. Chapter 633. In the distance, under the cover of the dense forest, a bluestone city could be faintly seen, like a giant beast crawling in the forest. This was not the largest city Gray had ever seen, but it was the city with the highest usage of runes that Gray had ever seen. The city walls were filled with complicated patterns, densely packed like decorations, but they were definitely not decorations. They were a large-scale runic array with some kind of effect. Above the city wall, there was something that looked like a crossbow fixed at certain intervals. However, it was clearly different from a crossbow. It was much larger than an ordinary crossbow, and there were rune patterns on its surface. It should be a rune weapon. Some of the buildings in the city were taller than the city walls, revealing their spires. On the spires, there were runic lights of various colors. At night, these runic lights should be lit up, dispelling the darkness of the city and showing the extraordinariness of these buildings. At the entrance of the city, carriages could be seen coming in and out from time to time. These carriages all had runic patterns on them, the only difference being the complexity of the runic patterns. Gray even saw a carriage that was floating in the air about 20 to 30 centimeters above the ground. There should be some kind of floating runic pattern on the carriage's surface. Floating in the air, there were no wheels touching the ground, so naturally there would not be any bumps and the journey would be very smooth. This kind of carriage was clearly more comfortable than the ones that ran on wheels. After entering the city, Gray was even more certain that runes were used in all aspects of life. There were runic lights hanging on metal poles that were taller than a person on the side of the road. Apart from that, the buildings on both sides of the road also had runic patterns on them. The complexity of the runes was determined by the exquisiteness of the building. The more exquisite the building, the more complex the runes. The more ordinary the building, the simpler the runes. This was a city with a high level of rune culture, and runes were already used in all aspects of life. Sir Gray, please get on the carriage. Edmund and his daughter hired 3 carriages at the city gate and politely led Gray into the first carriage, heading into the city. As soon as he entered the carriage, the scorching heat disappeared and a cool breeze followed. The runic array on the surface of the carriage should be a kind of runic array that could control the temperature. Finally, the carriage stopped in front of a large mansion in the center of the city. In this city where the strongest powerhouse was Demon Shine, the Bylan family had a king-level warrior overseeing them. In this city, the status of the Bylan family should not be low. There were already people coming out to welcome him. The one leading them was a middle-aged woman, Edmund's wife. After being introduced by Almond and his daughter, Gray was warmly welcomed into the mansion. At this point, Gray was temporarily staying with the Bylan family. A few days later, in the Bylan family's library. Forbidden Forest, what an appropriate name. The language of the origin world was the same as the language of the Empire, proving once again that the Empire and the origin world were connected. After flipping through the books in the Bylan family's library, Gray understood what kind of forest he had been living in for the past half a year. It was called the Forbidden Forest. Just from a name alone, one could already guess how dangerous this forest was. In fact, Gray had a deep understanding of how dangerous this forest was. Not only were there disaster-level blood beasts, but there were also blood beasts that were even more dangerous than disaster-level blood beasts. Even with all kinds of means, he had to be very careful in this forest. One could imagine how dangerous this forest was. Through the Bylan family's library, Gray had a clearer understanding of the dangers of the Forbidden Forest. He was even a little glad that the place he had been wandering in for the past half a year was not the depths of the Forbidden Forest. According to the introduction in the book, the depths of the Forbidden Forest had rule-level blood beasts that were comparable to law-level powerhouses. If it was said that magic light powerhouses were worthy of being called the strongest in the origin world, then law-level powerhouses were also worthy of being called the strongest in the origin world. They were not only called the strongest, but also called the Saints. They had the strongest power in the origin world. The strength of law-level blood beasts that were comparable to law-level powerhouses was evident. Most terrifyingly, these blood beasts also grasped the power of laws. The power of laws had always been known for being powerful and mysterious. If he really did enter the depths of the Forbidden Forest, no matter how careful he was, it was very likely that he would die with his current strength. That's pretty much it. It's time to carefully consider my future plans. Closing the book and putting it back, Gray sank into his thoughts. After flipping through the books for the past few days, Gray had a rough understanding of the origin world and his current location. Gray felt that it was time to consider his future plans. He only had a single objective in coming to the origin world, which was to use the cultivation conditions of the origin world to speed up his cultivation so that he could contend against the Radiant St. Hall as soon as possible. His plans naturally had to be carried out with this as a goal. I should find a place to settle down temporarily. If he traveled, it would more or less affect his cultivation. As a result, Gray preferred to settle down somewhere and cultivate peacefully. With the characteristics of his second metamorphosis, his strength would definitely increase rapidly as long as he cultivated peacefully. I have to consider the threat of the Radiant Saint Hall. Fortunately, the teleportation range of the random teleportation orb is unimaginable. I'm no longer within the Radiant Saint Hall's range of influence. The Holy Maiden of the Radiant Saint Hall had seen Gray's appearance before, so he needed to be careful not to be discovered by the Radiant Saint Hall. Fortunately, the teleportation range of the random teleportation orb was far greater than he had expected. He was currently in the Chaos region, and the most powerful organization was an organization called the Chaos Temple. Clearly, this was not within the Radiant Saint Hall's range of influence. Since he was not within the Radiant Saint Hall's range of influence, the chances of being discovered by the Radiant Saint Hall had become much smaller. After all, no organization would want another organization to exist within their range of influence. Cultivation doesn't require too much of an environment. Any place is fine, but in principle, it's best if I can get close to a large forest. Gray's abilities could not be separated from the blood of blood beasts. He needed the blood of blood beasts for his growth. Forests were a treasure trove of blood from various blood beasts, so it was best if he could settle down in a city close to a forest. Manwell City really is a good choice. Gray could not help but seriously consider the feasibility of settling down in Manwell City. Manwell City clearly fit the criteria of being close to a forest very well, and the forest near Manwell City was not simple at all. There were even blood beasts at the level of laws there, so one could imagine how abundant the resources of blood beasts were. Most importantly, there was nothing in Manwell City that could threaten him. If he was targeted by the clan in charge of the city for some reason, he would be able to deal with it. From these 2 points, Manwell City was an ideal city for him to settle down in. I'll take a look around the city before making a decision. In the end, Gray did not make a decision. He decided to take a stroll around the city and inspect it before making a decision. He could also use this opportunity to find a suitable residence in the city. He definitely had to buy a residence. He could not stay in the Byland family all the time. He had too many secrets. If he stayed in the Byland family for a long time, it would be too inconvenient, and it was very likely that his secrets would be exposed. With this in mind, Gray left the Byland family's library. After informing the servant of the Milan family, he walked out of the Byland family. "Your Excellency Gray, why don't you let me be your guide?" Knowing that Gray was going out, Kinsa rushed over in a hurry. She was wearing a purple lace skirt that only covered her knees. According to the concept of this world, it could already be called a short skirt, revealing a pair of slender, white, and long legs. Her perky figure was wrapped in this skirt, seeming to be on the verge of popping out. Her exquisite face was covered in light makeup, making her already beautiful face even more beautiful. However, there was a trace of tiredness on her face, as if she had not rested well these past few days. "I'm sorry. Because of the previous casualties, my father and I have been comforting the families of the dead and neglected Your Excellency." Kinsa had an apologetic look on her face. "Miss Kinsa, you don't have to be so apologetic. After what happened in the Byland family, it is reasonable for them to be very busy. Miss Kinsa, you should pay more attention to rest." Gray shook his head and said. Sitting in the Byland family's carriage, Gray and Kinsa left the residence of the Byland family and appeared on the street outside. They slowly walked along the street. The carriage was suspended 20 to 30 centimeters above the ground. There was not the slightest bump as it moved forward. The temperature rune array kept the carriage cool at all times. Gray opened the window and looked at the scenery and buildings along the way. He saw carriages with different outfits passing by. He saw people wearing ordinary clothes walking in the hot weather. Their foreheads were covered in sweat. Under the scorching sun, they lowered their heads and walked quickly. There was a disparity between the rich and the poor everywhere. Obviously, it was the same here. He also saw all kinds of shops by the roadside. There were fruits, meat, leather, and many other kinds. That shop is... Suddenly, Gray's eyes caught sight of a 3-story building that was built with a kind of jade material. It looked like a building carved out of jade. This was a very luxurious building. Gray couldn't help but be interested and asked Kinsa, who was beside him. That is the largest blood fiend purchasing and selling shop in Manuel City. Would Sir Gray like to go in and take a look? Seeing that Gray seemed to be interested in this shop, Kinsa smiled and said, "Sure." Gray would be very interested in anything related to blood fiends. Knowing that this was a shop that sold and purchased blood, Gray was naturally very interested. The carriage stopped at the square outside the shop. There were many other carriages that stopped here like them. It was just that the quality of the carriages was slightly lower than the Byland family's. After all, the Byland family had a king-class expert. The quality of their carriages was naturally not low. However, among the carriages that stopped here, there was a carriage that was not inferior to theirs. Seeing the family emblem on the carriage, Kinsa frowned slightly. However, seeing that Gray was very interested, she could only lead Gray into the shop. Chapter 634. This was a store that was luxuriously decorated, but not overly ostentatious. Inside the store, the pillars, the floor, and the booth were all made of the same jade material as the outside. The surface was engraved with exquisite patterns that were filled with gold. There was an artistic quality within the nobility, less ostentatious and more elegant. There were quite a few people in the store. Many of them stopped in front of the booths, their eyes sweeping over the crystal containers filled with blood fiends' blood as they inquired of the shop assistants behind the booths. The first and second floors are filled with ordinary blood. The truly precious blood is on the third floor. Without stopping on the first floor, Kinshaw led Gray to the third floor. The number of booths on the third floor was undoubtedly much fewer, but in contrast, the packaging of blood fiends' blood on each booth was even more exquisite. The containers were polished with the finest blue crystal, their surface engraved with exquisite patterns. Not only were the names of the blood fiends engraved on the crystal containers, but the outer appearance of the blood fiends were also drawn on the crystal containers. Every crystal container was like a work of art. After arriving at a random booth, Gray looked at the blood fiend's blood displayed on the booth. He discovered that there were several types of magic light rank blood fiends with a fire attribute. He inquired about the price and found that each portion was generally around 1,000 magic coins. The price would increase or decrease according to the rarity of the blood fiend. When they moved to another booth, they no longer saw the blood of magic light class blood fiends. Instead, they saw blood of king class blood fiends. However, this blood was not ordinary blood. It was the blood essence of king class blood fiends. After extracting all the essence from a blood fiend's blood, only one portion of blood essence could be obtained. Therefore, even though it was only king rank blood fiend's blood, its price wasn't low. It was generally in the tens of thousands of magic coins. Do you sell Phantom Fox's blood in your store? After looking at a few more booths, Gray noticed that they were all selling the blood and essence of blood fiends of the king and magic light ranks. He couldn't help but think of another type of blood fiend he had been searching for all this time. This type of blood fiend possessed the power of a ghost. Hence, he asked one of the employees, "Apologies, Your Excellency. The Phantom Fox is a very rare type of magic light rank blood fiend. We don't sell its blood here." The shop assistant shook his head apologetically. The purchasing power in Manuel City was limited. It was difficult to sell rare blood fiends' blood, so they only sold common blood fiends' blood here. When Gray and Ken appeared on the third floor of the shop, a woman who was followed by a female servant noticed them. The woman was wearing a black dress and a pair of open-toed high boots. She had a beautiful face and was a very elegant woman. "Long time no see. After what happened, I thought you would be busy for a while. I didn't expect to see you here. You've settled it so quickly?" After observing the two for a while, she walked over and greeted Kinsa with a faint smile on her face. "You don't have to worry about it. The Byland family will naturally take care of it." Kinshaw also had a smile on her face. However, her smile was a little cold. Her relationship with the other party and the clan behind the other party could not be considered good. The other party's question was clearly more of a joke. "And this is—" The woman in the black dress did not seem to hear Kinshaw's dissatisfied response. It made Kinshaw feel like she had punched the air. She looked at Gray and sized him up. She had been observing Gray since the beginning. Someone who could make a direct descendant of the Bylan family take the time to accompany him during this critical period was probably not a simple person. The direct descendants of several major forces in the nearby area flashed through her mind. She wanted to guess the identity of this person, but she could not find anyone who matched the appearance of this person. Sir Gray is a distinguished guest of the Bylan family. Kinshaw's eyes were a little cautious, and her voice had a hint of warning. She noticed the woman in the black dress was curious and interested in Gray. She could not help but be vigilant. Gray must have a major force behind him. This was almost certain. She naturally did not want such a person to be recruited by a family that was vaguely hostile to the Bylan family. "Hello, I'm Charlotte Colum." The woman in the black dress did not care about Kinshaw's warning at all. She stretched out her hand as if to provoke Gray. "Hello, I'm Gray Fergus." Gray stretched out his hand and gently shook the woman's hand. It was soft and boneless to the touch. However, he did not hold it for long. He naturally could see that the woman in the black dress did not get along with Kinshaw. Their conversation was obviously filled with the smell of gunpowder. However, since the woman in the black dress did not harbor any hostility toward him, he naturally would not treat her with hostility. As for the grudges between the two families, it was none of his business. He did not owe the Bylan family anything. In fact, he might as well say that he had saved the Bylan family. Taking a step back, shaking hands was just normal etiquette. It did not mean anything. The woman in the black dress did not mindlessly involve him in the grudges with the Bylan family. This was something he was happy to see. Although he was not afraid of trouble, he definitely did not want trouble to come knocking on his door. Even if it was to swat a fly, he still had to do it. Sir Gray is looking for the blood of the Phantom Fox. Ignoring Kinshaw, Charlotte Colum asked. Obviously, she had heard the conversation between Gray and the shop assistant. "Yes, but this shop does not sell it. Could it be that Miss Charlotte knows something related to this?" Gray looked at Charlotte Colum. From her words, he could vaguely tell that she seemed to know something about the Phantom Fox. "I do know something related to this. 2 weeks later, there will be an auction in Hangsman City. One of the items being auctioned is the blood essence of the Phantom Fox. Sir Gray can go and participate in this auction." Charlotte Colum nodded and said, "This information is very important to me. Thank you, Miss Charlotte." Gray expressed his gratitude. The information provided by the woman was indeed very useful to him. To a certain extent, it was not an exaggeration to say that he owed the woman a favor. "Then I will take my leave." Charlotte Colum glanced at Kinshaw provocatively and turned to leave. No matter what the relationship between Gray and the Bylan family would be in the future, it was a fact that Gray owed her a favor. His attitude towards the Colum family would definitely be more friendly. When she came to an area with no one around, she immediately ordered the servant beside her. "Go and investigate this person. It would be best if you could find out how he contacted the Bylan family." After leaving the blood shop and strolling around the city for an hour or two, Gray and Kinshaw returned to the Bylan family. Whether or not they would settle down in Manwell City had not been decided yet. However, there was an unexpected surprise. They actually found out about the blood of the Phantom Fox. It was an unexpected surprise. The Phantom ability was a very powerful ability. Although there were restrictions on its use, Gray did not use it much. However, the power of this ability could not be denied. The last time he hunted that giant ape with the ability to control corpses, if not for the Phantom ability, it would have been very difficult for him to succeed. From this point alone, it was not difficult to see the power of the Phantom ability. Moreover, the greatest benefit of increasing the Phantom ability bloodline was increasing the level of the Resurrection ability. The Resurrection ability was a combination of the Phantom ability and the Corpse ability. It was a very useful ability. It could turn former enemies into the most loyal subordinates. It was very useful in many places. However, this ability had already reached the limit of control. If he wanted to increase this limit, he had to increase the bloodline level of the Phantom ability and the Corpse ability. The Corpse ability bloodline level had already been increased to the Magic Light level. The only thing missing was the bloodline level of the Phantom ability. As long as the bloodline level of the phantom ability was increased, the upper limit of the resurrection ability would naturally increase. Being able to use the resurrection ability again would be very beneficial to him. Let alone other things, he could completely rely on this method to plant someone in the Radiant Temple and become his spy. Since he was already standing on the opposite side of the Radiant Temple, he naturally had to deepen his understanding of the Radiant Temple and pay attention to their movements. Planting a spy was undoubtedly the best method. This Phantom Fox Blood Essence, I have to buy it. Gray was determined to obtain the Spectral Magic Fox's Blood Essence. If he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would be able to encounter it again. Although the Phantom Fox was only a magic light level blood beast, it was a blood beast with a very special soul ability. He had already learned from reading many books in the past few days that this kind of blood beast was very rare even in the source world. Once he missed it, it would be very difficult to encounter it again. 10 million magic coins should be enough. Gray checked his current wealth. It was impossible to accurately calculate the wealth of jewels and gems, but the number of magic coins was at least 10 million. Previously, in the blood sale and purchase shop, he had inquired about the price of a normal magic light level blood essence. It was about a few 100,000. Although the Phantom Fox Blood Essence was rare, it should not exceed this price by too much. 10 million magic coins should be enough to auction it off. The auction will be held 2 weeks later in Hensman City. Gray took out the map he had just bought and searched on it. Soon he found Hensman City. This city was located southwest of Manwell City. Based on the length ratio marked on the side of the map, it was about 1,000 kilometers southwest. With his current speed, he could reach this distance in 1 or 2 hours. He only needed to arrive 1 day in advance. The Colum family. Miss, we have investigated thoroughly. A woman in maid attire bowed respectfully to Charlotte Colum and said, "Speak." Charlotte Colum nodded. This person was encountered by the Byland family in the Forbidden Forest. At that time, the Byland family was besieged by 3 king-level blood beasts. It was this person who saved the Byland family. This person lost his way in the forest, so he let the Byland family lead the way to Manwell City and stayed in the Byland family. Although the Byland family had already issued a gag order, as long as they had money, they could always pry open some loopholes. After paying a certain price, the Colum family quickly obtained information about Gray from one of the survivors. Chapter 635. He saved the Byland family from the attack of 3 king-level blood fiends. Charlotte Colum's eyes were filled with surprise. To be able to defeat 3 king-level blood fiends, it meant that the other party's strength surpassed the 3 king-level blood fiends. The other party didn't look old, but he had such strength. It was very likely that he had a powerful family behind him. Although it was also possible that the other party was talented in cultivation and relied on his own efforts and talent to achieve such achievements, it was more likely that the other party had a powerful family behind him. Yes, and among the 3 king-level blood fiends, there was a blood fiend with mixed abilities. However, he still defeated it and easily captured 2 of the king-level blood fiends. The female servant added, "To be able to defeat a king-level blood fiend with mixed abilities, his strength is not only king-level, but at least second-tier king-level." Charlotte Colum's eyes narrowed slightly. She couldn't help but develop a strong interest in Gray. A person who came from a powerful family and had great potential and strength, such a person was obviously worthy of being roped in. In the morning, more than 10 days later, Gray withdrew from his cultivation and ended the morning training. He was not at the Byland family's mansion, but at his own residence. After careful consideration, he finally decided to stay in Manwell City temporarily. Therefore, he spent 12,000 magic coins to get the Byland family to help him buy a residence in the city. Although the size of the residence was not as big as the Byland family's, it was more than enough for him to live alone. Moreover, this residence was very well equipped. It had a training room, a bathroom, and everything else. There were also a few servants, which saved him the trouble of hiring new servants. This made him very satisfied. It's time to set off. There was still a day before the auction in Hensman City began. It was already the scheduled time to set off. After instructing the servants, Gray set off for Hensman City. He didn't take a carriage. Although the carriage was of high class, it was slow. Even the best horse couldn't travel more than 1,000 miles in a day. If he took a carriage, he might not be able to make it today. A pair of greenish-black wings sprouted from his back. Gray soared into the sky and flew out of the city. Compared to running and eating dirt on the ground, it was obviously faster to fly in a straight line in the sky. Therefore, he chose to fly. Someone is flying in the city. Gray, who was flying in the air, was immediately noticed by the city guards on the city wall. Although this city did not have any written prohibitions, there was an unwritten rule that prohibited flying within the city. However, this was the first time Gray had arrived in this city, and no one had told Gray about this. Naturally, Gray did not know about this. "Commander, should we use the crossbows to stop them?" A soldier on duty asked a middle-aged man in his 40s. "Is there a rule against flying?" The middle-aged man turned around and glared at the soldier who asked the question. No. The soldier's heart was filled with grievances. He did not understand why the commander was angry at him. "Since there are no rules, what does it have to do with us?" The middle-aged man looked at the soldier with dissatisfaction. There was disappointment in his eyes. He usually thought that this kid was very clever, but he didn't expect him to be so stupid today. He originally wanted to promote him, but now it seemed that he had to forget about it. What eyesight! Was he an ordinary blood warrior with that kind of flying speed? He was definitely a king-class expert, and definitely not an ordinary king-class expert. Even the Manuel clan would not say anything in front of him. Although the Manuel clan was powerful in this city, they would definitely not find trouble with a king-class expert over such a small matter. Since the Manuel clan would not find trouble with him over such a small matter, then why would he, the commander of the city guards, find trouble with him? Not only would he offend a king-class expert for no reason, but he would also not gain any benefits. After flying over the city wall and toward the southwest, Gray saw a city much larger than Manuel City appear in front of him several hours later. "I'm finally here." Looking at the city, Gray let out a sigh of relief. He should have been able to reach it in just over an hour, but he had spent several hours because he had taken the wrong path. He had to adjust his direction several times before finally arriving at this city. It was his first time here, and he did not know the way. It was also because the map was not accurate and had deviated. Fortunately, he had finally arrived and did not delay tomorrow's auction. He descended from the sky and landed in the city. The city was quite large, and it was not easy to find an auction house in such a large city. However, this was not a problem for him. After spending a few magic coins to hire a carriage, Gray was immediately pulled to a hotel only a street away from the auction house by the coachman, who could be said to be a local tyrant. There are many good things in this auction. Yes, it's almost the grandest auction this year. I heard that there will be many magic potions from Master Joseph being auctioned. Most of the people staying in the hotel were people who had come to participate in the auction. When Gray was eating in the hotel's restaurant, he could hear conversations about the auction from time to time. Among them, the most talked about was the magic potions of a potion master called Joseph. Potion masters were very rare and special talents even in the source world. They were highly respected and would be honored guests of various major forces no matter where they went. Of course, the potion masters here were completely different from the potion masters in this material plane. According to the evaluation standards of the potion masters in the source world, the potion masters in this material plane could only be considered as potion masters. There was still a long way to go before they could become potion masters. The evaluation standard of the potion masters in the source world was to be able to refine magic potions of rank 3 and above. Those below that could only be called potion masters. Those who could not even refine magic potions could only be called potion master apprentices. Only those who could refine rank 3 magic potions could be called potion masters. This was definitely an extremely difficult evaluation standard. For example, the Purple Moon Potion and Flame Potion that Gray had taken before could only be considered as rank 2 potions. This was already the highest standard of potion masters in this material plane. In other words, there was not even a single potion master in this material plane. The main reason for this situation was the lack of relevant potion refining formulas and techniques. Otherwise, such a large material plane would not be unable to produce a single potion master. The next evening, under the dazzling illumination of various rune lights, the auction officially began. Without the invitation letter that the auction house sent to the VIPs, Gray was assessed as an ordinary guest and was led to the hall on the first floor to participate in the auction. He had a number plate marked 241 in his hand. There was a number on it that represented his auction number. After the auction ended, he would have to go to the auction backstage to pay for the auction items using this number plate. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am the auctioneer for this auction, Old Tom. The auctioneer was an old man. He was dressed in a decent suit and his hair was neatly combed. After walking up to the auction stage, he only said a few words and began the auction. The first item is a necklace, Crystal Love, personally made by the jewelry master, Master Taylor. The necklace is made of purple jade crystal and has the effect of refreshing the mind. The starting price is 1,000 magic coins. Each increment must not be less than 100 magic coins. 1,100 magic coins, 1,200 magic coins, 1,300 magic coins, 5,000 magic coins. In the end, this item was bought by a noble woman for 5,000 magic coins. If it was just the amethyst crystal, it would naturally not be worth this price. However, since it was made by a jewelry master, it was different. It was beautiful and practical at the same time, which made its value increase several times. The old man presiding over the auction was quite satisfied with the final price. Soon, the auction for the second item began. The second item is a second-tier magic potion, Speed Potion. It can allow one to have the speed of a regent for a short period of time. It is an excellent means of self-protection in a critical moment. The starting price is 1,500 magic coins. Each increment must not be less than 100 magic coins. Obviously, this speed potion was a type of ability potion. It could allow one to have abilities that did not belong to them for a short period of time. The hunter potion that Gray had taken before was one of the ability potions. It allowed him to have a super long sense of smell that did not belong to him for a short period of time. 1,700 magic coins, 2,000 magic coins, 2,200 magic coins. No one would complain about having too many of such life-saving means. Immediately, many people participated in the auction. In the end, the bottle was sold for 8,300 magic coins. The third item, the fourth item, the 15th item is a second-tier amputated limb potion. It can reconnect a severed limb. The starting price is 2,000 magic coins. The 26th item is a third-tier magic potion, Blood Dragon Potion, refined by Potion Master Joseph. It can greatly increase one's strength. The starting price is 5,000 magic coins. The 41st item is a fourth-tier magic potion, Youth Potion, refined by Potion Master Joseph. It can maintain one's youthful appearance for 100 years. The starting price is 10,000 magic coins. Each increment must not be less than 1,000 magic coins. In the following auction, Gray witnessed the popularity of potion masters. Any magic potion was highly sought after, and the bidding was extremely intense. Even he was attracted to the magic potion and participated in the auction. In the end, he bought the bottle of Blood Dragon Potion for 55,000 magic coins. If it were any other magic potion, he would not have cared. After all, he had many tricks up his sleeve. Ordinary magic potions were not very useful to him. However, this bottle of Blood Dragon Potion was different. He had once obtained a bottle and consumed it. This was a magic potion that could greatly increase one's strength. Even he could not help but be tempted. Ahem. On the auction stage, the old auctioneer coughed twice and began the auction of the next item. The 48th item is the blood essence of the Phantom Fox. The starting price is 100,000 magic coins. Each increment must not be less than 10,000 magic coins. Chapter 636. It's finally begun. Gray sat up straight and stared at the auction stage with burning eyes. On the auction stage, there was an exquisite blue crystal container on a tray made of golden wood. It was about 3 inches tall and had a finely carved surface. It looked like a work of art. This was the container that contained the blood essence of the spectral fox. 150,000 magic coins, 180,000 magic coins, 200,000 magic coins, 500,000 magic coins. Almost as soon as the start of the auction was announced, the sounds of bidding were endless. Obviously, there were many people who had their eyes on the blood essence of the spectral fox. After a while, the price had been raised to 500,000 magic coins, and the price was still rising rapidly. Gray heard more than a dozen different voices. They were all Gray's competitors. Although the spectral fox was only a magic light-level blood fiend, it was a rare soul-type blood fiend. Its blood, especially its blood essence, had many functions. In the hands of a refiner, they could refine a magic weapon that could control ghosts. This was a very special magic weapon that was almost unsolvable under certain special circumstances. Naturally, its value was extremely high. In the hands of an alchemist, they could refine an ability potion, the spectral potion. This was a special potion that could make people fearless of ghosts for a short period of time. The history of the Source World was extremely long. In this long history, there had been many earth-shattering battles. Without exception, many people had died on those battlefields, including many powerhouses. There were bound to be many precious things left in such places. It was not a delusion to get rich overnight. However, such places were easy to breed ghosts. A large number of ghosts gathered and could even appear during the day. In order to explore such places, it was impossible to kill all of them with one's ability, especially the ghosts that were formed after the death of powerhouses. Even if there were fire and lightning abilities that could restrain them, they would not be able to hurt them if they were below a certain level. Only the spectral potion that could make people fearless of ghosts could allow them to travel freely in such places. As long as there was such a potion, there was no need to worry about not being able to sell it. In the hands of a rune master, the blood essence of the spectral fox could be used to make rune ink for a soul-type runic array. Soul-type things had always been the most difficult to guard against. One could imagine the value of this runic array. These three types of people were not the only ones participating in the auction. There were also some speculators or collectors. They bought rare things at a high price and then sold them at a higher price at the right time. 550,000 magic coins, 600,000 magic coins, 640,000 magic coins. As soon as Gray made a bid, it was immediately suppressed by other people's bids. The price was still rising at an extremely fast speed. He stopped bidding and was going to join the bidding after the crazy price. According to his estimation, the crazy growth wouldn't slow down until the price exceeded 1 million magic coins. Sure enough, the bidding didn't slow down until the price exceeded 1 million magic coins. Although the magic ghost fox's blood essence was precious, no matter how precious it was, there was still a limit to how much a person could bear. If it exceeded this limit, they would naturally give up. 1 million. Gray began to bid, increasing the price by 100,000 in one breath. 1,200,000 magic coins. In a private room, an old man in a white robe with golden edges also started bidding. He also raised the price by 100,000 magic coins. Obviously, there were people with the same plan as Gray. There was no shortage of smart people in this world. What was worth noting was the other party's identity. The golden edges on his white robe were in the shape of a six-pointed star. This was the symbol of a rune master recognized by the rune temple. The other party was a distinguished rune master. Of course, the other party's rune master was not comparable to the rune masters in Gray's original dimension. The other party's value was definitely not lower than that of a potion master. 1,300,000 magic coins. In another private room, a middle-aged man with a beard and strong arms in tight leather armor made a bid. Although the middle-aged man was dressed sloppily, his status was not low. He was a master refiner who had once created a heritage weapon. 1,400,000 magic coins. In a private room a few private rooms away, a young man with purple-black hair made a bid with a gloomy face. He was currently in a very bad mood, because this spectral magic fox blood essence should not have appeared in the auction, and he was going to get it at a very low price. Bowden family, just you wait. He let out a cold snort from his nose, and his eyes were filled with extreme coldness. This ghost fox blood essence belonged to a declining family, the modern family. This family had once produced a magic light warrior hundreds of years ago. However, after that magic light warrior died in the Forbidden Forest, this family no longer had its former glory. It became a family with only one king-level master. The ghost fox blood essence was hunted by that magic light warrior when he was still alive. His family was preparing to go to a special place and needed the ghost potion. After some investigation, his family found out about this and asked this family to buy it. Of course, the price of the purchase was naturally quite low. Relying on his family's power, he was going to buy the ghost fox blood essence at a low price. He originally thought that the other party would give in, but he did not expect this family to be unusually stubborn. Not only did they refuse, but they also put the ghost fox blood essence in the auction house for auction. He had no choice but to participate in this auction and spend several times more money to buy the ghost fox blood essence. 1,500,000 magic coins. Gray continued to bid. He was the only person sitting on the first floor to participate in the auction. Many people looked at him, which was very conspicuous. However, he did not care so much. This ghost fox blood essence was too useful to him. He had to bid for it no matter what. 1,600,000 magic coins. The middle-aged man, who was a master refiner, raised the price. 1,700,000 magic coins. The old man, who was a rune master, raised the price. 1,900,000 magic coins. A young man with purple-black hair raised the price by 200,000 with a gloomy look on his face. If he couldn't get his hands on the spectral magic fox's blood essence this time, his position in the family would be greatly affected. Of course, even if he got his hands on it, he would have to pay such a huge price to get it. 2 million magic coins. Gray continued to raise the price without the slightest hesitation in his eyes. At this point, the price was already 10 times that of an ordinary magic light-rank blood fiend's blood essence. However, he was determined to obtain the spectral fox's blood essence. As long as he had enough magic coins, he wouldn't give up. Even if he didn't have enough magic coins, he was prepared to use the jewelry he had on him as collateral. Unlike Gray, who did not hesitate to raise the price, the old rune master and the middle-aged master refiner hesitated. 2 million magic coins was already a very high price. Even if it was a rare item like the ghost fox blood essence, they had to carefully consider whether it was worth it. After a little hesitation, the two stopped raising the price. It was not that they could not afford more magic coins, but 2 million magic coins had exceeded their expectations. 2,100,000 magic coins. The young man with purple-black hair gritted his teeth and raised the price. This ghost fox blood essence was of great use to his family, so he had to auction it no matter what. However, the current price was almost exceeding the amount of magic coins he had. Thinking of this, his hatred for the Bowden family deepened. If the Bowden family did not have a good relationship with a force behind them, he would have used force against the modern family. 2,200,000 magic coins. Gray did not hesitate to raise the price by another 100,000 magic coins. 2,300,000 magic coins. The young man with purple-black hair looked at the first floor through the purple crystal of the private room with a cold look in his eyes. His hatred spread from the Bowden family to Gray. The Bowden family was abominable, but the other party who was still competing with him at such a high price was equally abominable. He already had some suspicions that Gray was deliberately arranged by the Bowden family to annoy him. The reason why he was so suspicious was that the other party appeared on the first floor. A person who could afford more than 2 million magic coins was definitely qualified to sit in the private room on the second floor. However, the other party appeared on the first floor, which was very abnormal. In addition, the Bowden family knew that he was determined to get the ghost fox, so they deliberately arranged a person to annoy him to get revenge on him for suppressing others with his power. The possibility was very high. 2,400,000 magic coins. Gray could hear the coldness in the voice of the young man in the private room, but he naturally could not back down here, so he raised the price again. "It's yours." Hearing Gray raise the price without hesitation, the The coldness in the eyes of the young man with purple-black hair almost solidified. He snorted and announced that he would give up the bid. He was almost certain that the other party was the person sent by the Bowden family to mess up the situation. Everything had its own value limit, and it was impossible to exceed this value limit and still increase wildly. 2 million was almost the limit of the ghost fox's blood essence. This was also the reason why the middle-aged master refiner and the old rune master in the private room gave up. However, the other party did not hesitate to raise the price every time, as if the value of the ghost fox's blood essence was far more than that. Either the ghost fox's blood essence had some great use in the hands of the other party, or the other party was sent by the Bowden family to annoy him. He was more inclined to the latter. Although the ghost fox was rare, its value had been determined over the years. It was impossible for it to have a greater value, so he believed that the other party was sent by the Bowden family to annoy him. After confirming that the other party was sent by the Bowden family to annoy him, he immediately gave up the idea of raising the price. With the Bowden family's current foundation, they definitely could not gather so many magic coins. It would be interesting to see if the other party could not take out the money. When the time came, the Bowden family would not only offend him, but also the auction house. Even his family would not dare to offend the forces behind the auction house. When the time came, the Bowden family would suffer.